I get excited to sit down and make most of these videos, but this one, I just have this extra feeling. I'm motivated. I'm just so motivated to get this video done today. Welcome in, everybody, to the reveal of the number 14 team in my power rankings as we head into the start of the 2026 NFL season. As today, we will take a deep dive into the Chicago Bears. And I'm sure Bears fans are tired of hearing that all the analytics say that this team is going to regress.
Well, we're the number one regression candidates, so I think we got plenty of motivation ourselves.
A team that had some pretty remarkable turnover luck last year and won a lot of close games on some pretty crazy late game heroics from Caleb Williams. And I am a believer that those things should lead to some things coming back to earth for the Chicago Bears, but that does not mean that this team has to be destined for regression. Today, we are going to talk about a lot of exciting aspects of this team and what areas could prove to help this team combat that regression a little bit this year. Should be a fun deep dive ahead here today. As we do get started, please do take just a second to hit that like button down below. It is a free and easy thing that really does help support my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure you're subscribed as well so you don't miss any of these deep dives as we lead up to the number one team in my power rankings. And the last little plug here is I want to remind you guys, the new hats are on sale on the market. I have sold about half of these, so shout out to everyone that was able to go in and get a hat. Thank you for the purchase. Thank you for supporting the channel that way by buying some merch. But come get these hats while you can. They're super nice quality. I love how they turned out. Don't want you to miss out if you're interested. That link is in the description down below, or just go to thatfranchisestore.com. All right, let's begin. As we do in this series, we will go through every aspect of the team, through the entire roster and the coaching staff. And at the beginning of every segment there, we'll take a look at their offseason changes and ask the big question, did they get better, worse, or stay the same at that spot? And for the Chicago Bears and their coaching staff, I said neutral, though their offensive coordinator, Declan Doyle, did get hired to go call plays and be the coordinator over in Baltimore. So it is a notable loss, and they will be promoting Press Taylor up to offensive coordinator. But this is, of course, Ben Johnson's offense. So not something I'm really worried about there, but definitely worth noting. But let's dissect this really incredible coaching staff, obviously led by Ben Johnson, who heading into last year, we discussed him as one of the best head coach candidates to hit the market in recent memory. And with him coming in here to Chicago, knowing he was going to be uniting with Caleb Williams, I really don't think the bar, the expectations could have been set any higher for what we were hoping to see in year one of Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams together. And I would say he even exceeded those expectations that were maybe even unreasonable to begin with. And the thing with Ben Johnson is he just keeps hitting these green lights. Year after year after year in Detroit, it was like, oh, can they really sustain having one of the three best offenses in the league for 3 straight years with Jared Goff as the quarterback? Can they really keep having this incredible play calling every single week? And yeah, they did. To have that resume, to come in and bring that offensive prowess to the table to a Chicago Bears team that, for as long as I've been watching football, has been seeking any semblance of offensive stability, right? This team has always felt like the team that screws up quarterbacks. It can never get the offense going. And Ben Johnson comes in and in so many ways did the impossible when you look at it that way. And not only that, like, we knew Ben Johnson can design an offense and call an offense with as a play caller. If you had any sort of, I don't want to say question marks, but one thing you maybe were curious about was, like, can he go from the coordinator role to being a head coach and the leader of an organization and build a locker room and team culture and that kind of stuff? And my goodness, he was like just as good at leading this locker room, firing up this locker room with multiple just thrilling moments. I think also, like, he demands a lot from his players. Like, accountability really matters for him. It's not just rah-rah, taking his shirt off and taking shots at Matt LaFleur, and like I think that helps the locker room. Some of those more I don't know, quirky moments or however you want to use to describe that, but like there's a real aspect of Ben Johnson's putting in the time. He's going to put you in a position to succeed, but you have to match his work ethic. There's a lot of like lead by example and accountability that he brings to the table as a head coach too. So the fact that he hit all these green lights, not just, coming into a new organization, young quarterback, making the offense work, all that, but to also just feel like an excellent leader of the team. I don't have any words left. Like Ben Johnson is trending towards, and this is the word that people always push back on, but I'm going to beg the question here. Is Ben Johnson really trending towards being one of these like generational coaches, a Belichick, Walsh, that type of deal where you look back on it and like, holy shit, that guy was a special, special coach. At this point, like there's nothing to really push back on as long as he keeps doing what he's doing. Like we could be at that point. And for him to be coming out of his rookie season, and I already have him as the 7th ranked head coach in a series and on a channel where you guys know, like I need to see multiple years of sustained success. I'm slower to react on everything in terms of rankings and that kind of stuff. That is an incredible amount of respect. And even with what he's accomplished, there's aspects of this that I'm not even like holding anything back. When you look at my rankings for pass game and run game coaching, I have the Bears tied for first in both categories. In fact, they stand alone for pass game coaching because I already felt for 3 years when he was in Detroit that he was probably the best offensive mind in the league. And then he comes in and does this with Chicago overnight. And I just have no doubt that he is at the top of the food chain in terms of who I want designing and calling my offense. And that, I think, takes me to the part of this where we can talk a little bit about the Bears scheme and kind of what Ben Johnson does that is so effective. Those like build a player graphics where a lot of times it's a quarterback or a running back and it's like, oh, you get the arm of Patrick Mahomes, the head of Tom Brady, the legs of Lamar Jackson, like those types of posts. Ben Johnson is in so many ways like a build a coach where he has all the best traits of all the best coaches, and not just the traits, but he runs a lot of the schemes of a lot of the best coaches and is just this perfect blend of all of it. Like schematically speaking, he has this perfect blend of sort of the Shanahan concepts, more heavy personnel, 12 personnel. The Bears do run a lot of wide zone, but like a Kyle Shanahan, he runs enough changeups to that wide zone with gap, inside zone, various, creative run concepts, pin and pull, just mixing in fun, nuanced, creative ways to keep things fresh in the run game and create explosives in the run game. I think there's a lot of Kyle Shanahan in there with that. But Ben Johnson's offense also brings in so much effectiveness from shotgun and spreading things out and tapping into quick bubble screens and more stuff that you would see in maybe like an Andy Reid, more spread, like modern pro spread style offense. A lot of their effective runs from the gun are much more of that pro spread background type of offense. And at large, those are kind of the two systems in the league, kind of the under center, heavy personnel, wide zone, Shanahan play action offense, and then more of the Andy Reid shotgun modern pro spread approach. The fact that really you can look at the Bears and say they utilize influences from both of those systems and how they design this offense. And anytime you're some blend of Kyle Shanahan and Andy Reid, that's pretty damn good. But he also just has that like elite like pulse of being the play caller of the team. There's a lot of coaches out there that can design a good playbook, but they might not necessarily have that game feel, knowing what buttons to press, when to press them. And yeah, Andy Reid, Kyle Shanahan have that. But if we're exhausting those on our build a coach graphic, so to speak, let's say he's got the play calling ingenuity of, say, Sean McVay or any, insert any elite play caller. He has that aspect of things. And all the way down to like the trick play stuff that is a part of his offense that is obviously not as big of a deal as the grand design of the offense. But I think like Josh McDaniels has always been incredible at like finding the right moment to call a trick play. Maybe not so much last year in New England, but over the years, that's a big thing with Ben Johnson is like knowing when to get a little wild and go off the beaten path with a creative trick play. Like he's got that in there. And then there's the other aspects of coaching too, right? Like I mentioned the accountability and just the leadership. Take any great leader of men type. Like Ben Johnson's got that as a head coach. He's got the quirkiness that you look for to be able to relate to players. And he's got the sort of like aggressive, modern thinking mentality, the willingness to go for it on fourth down, the Dan Campbell knee biter in him, if you will. There's just so many traits and schemes taken from all of the best coaches in the league, all packaged together perfectly with Ben Johnson. It's really special to see, man. And the fact that the Bears got this guy is incredible. And the further this goes on, the more and more it feels like, look, Dan Campbell's a great coach, but did the Lions screw up letting this guy out the door, especially with him going interdivision here? I don't know, man. It really feels like we're heading that way. I thought that was about the best thing I could say about Ben Johnson, while also simultaneously discussing some of the things he does schematically, which is honestly just a little bit of everything in perfect balance. But I really think he is about as close to a flawless coach as you can find. And if you think 7th is too low as a head coach ranking, just because it's only been a year, and there's some also incredible, other incredible head coaches in the league that I'm still waiting to push Ben Johnson over. Honestly, fair. 7th is where he landed for me. I will put it this way, though. If I'm building a team from scratch and I get to pick anybody in the league as my head coach, it's a tough call between him and Sean McVay right now, just because the momentum with Ben Johnson is that strong. And I don't think I'm like overglazing him either. I don't. So it's a fun place to start with the Chicago Bears. You do, of course, have Press Taylor getting promoted here. He is the brother of Bengals head coach Zach Taylor. We've already seen one offensive coordinator come through this coaching tree and go get an OC job elsewhere in Declan Doyle. So presumably that's going to keep happening as long as the Bears keep having offensive success. But it really doesn't, matter to me. It's similar to Sean McVay losing a new coach every year, Kyle Shanahan losing a new coach every year. As long as you have the big man at the top of the food chain there with the play sheet in his hand, I'm just not going to really sweat it all that much. Now, there is the other side of this coaching staff, the defensive side of things underneath Dennis Allen. And I have really always been a big Dennis Allen guy, especially in the kind of 2020s or so. I think he, in those last like 5 years or so in New Orleans, just did a really good job with those Saints defenses. Definitely had his limitations as a head coach, as we've seen with a lot of defensive minds around the league. Bears fans know a thing or two about that. But to get him as your defensive coordinator, I always thought this was a remarkable hire for the Bears. And looking back at the job he did last year, I think it was also about as much as you could have expected, especially when you know the injuries were going to stack up as much as they did. They lose their top 2 corners, especially. And Dennis Allen is a defensive coach that a lot of times will live or die based on his cornerbacks. Someone that wants to run a lot of press jam, cover one, that bump and run style. Someone that historically has not been afraid to blitz a good deal. And last year, they didn't have the bodies to consistently run cover one, and they did a lot of experimenting. They still ran a decent amount of cover one man, 14th most in the league, but 21%. Feel like Dennis Allen in an ideal world is going to get that at least into the 30s in terms of rates for running cover one. And it's not a huge surprise that the one zone coverage that they leaned into a good amount was cover 2, which is still going to have a lot of that press jam mentality to it, with those bigger corners trying to flush guys out to the sidelines and having those safeties over the top. But I don't know that what happened last year is the defense we can expect moving forward, or what Dennis Allen wants to run. Even the blitz rate being 29th in the NFL in blitz rate, I think that's fascinating. Some coordinators, when their secondary gets hurt, or if they don't have the defensive line to win with 4, they will lean on blitzing a lot, really to speed up the quarterback and kind of force the issue in that way. Well, not only did the Bears have injuries in the secondary, but they have a really bad defensive line. And Dennis Allen leaned more towards kind of sitting back a little bit more of a conservative approach, honestly, than we've seen from Dennis Allen in the past. And I just have watched enough Dennis Allen defenses to know that that's probably not the world he wants to live in. So I wouldn't be surprised if they get a little bit more aggressive, but who knows? Historically speaking, though, Dennis Allen has definitely been very much a 4-2 front with a lot of bump and run coverage, whether that's out of cover 1 or, cover 3 fire zones as well. And I don't know that one weird year in Chicago is enough for me to assume that he's not going to be that kind of guy again. And I do generally like that as a system, especially if the Bears can get to a point where they have the actual horses to run a system like that. I think it's a good sign that Dennis Allen is a good defensive coordinator. The fact that he did adjust and realized what he had to work with. We've seen a coach in a very similar, literally this system, Aaron Glenn, right, with the Jets. Even though it wasn't working, just kept running press jam cover 1 and running this style, the preferred Dennis Allen style of defense. And it was horrible with the Jets. So I do think it bodes well for Dennis Allen that he was able to be realistic about his roster, what they could get away with, adjusting the system that he has historically run, that he prefers to run. That is just what good defensive coordinators do. And again, I do think Dennis Allen is a good defensive coordinator. And it, in many ways, helped them get results. I think at some point in this video, and I already kind of teased it early on, you have to bring up the fact that the Bears defense was not good last year, yet they managed to lead the league in takeaways last year, 33 takeaways. And I'm not really here to argue with Bears fans over this. Either you're a stubborn Bears fan and you think that's going to happen again, to which case, good luck with that. We know turnovers are fleeting. And we also know that if teams are going to repeat league leading takeaway types of seasons, typically, if not every time, it's great pass rushes that will drive mistakes from the offense and lead to those takeaways. And the Bears certainly, spoiler alert, do not have the type of pass rush to project as a team that's going to force errors out of the quarterback. And this team also just had a bunch of fumble recoveries last year. This team forced 15 fumbles last year. They fell on 10 of them. And I think there's something to be said about wearing the Bears jersey, doing the peanut punch. They might be slightly better than the average team, or a good bit better than the average team at going for that ball and punching the ball out. But history tells us that recovering fumbles and repeating it the next year, that's even harder to project. Now, I think most Bears fans that I've just, talked with understand, we can't count on 33 takeaways and leading the league that way again, especially after we didn't really do anything to improve our defensive line. We're going to have to be better in other areas and not count on that really being the driving force behind the Bears defense, because on a play in, play out, yards per drive, yards per play basis, the Bears did have one of the worst defenses in the league. But to kind of wrap this point up, I will say for Dennis Allen, maybe being a little bit more bend, don't break, having your D-backs putting their eyes on the quarterback, being, in zone and teaching them to be as opportunistic as you possibly can. There is a coaching aspect to it as well. And sorry to bang on Aaron Glenn again here, but when you run a bunch of man coverage, you've got your backs turned to the quarterback, and the Jets infamously did not have an interception last year, right? So yes, there's fluky elements to it as well, but there's an element of it's just really good coaching. Like, hey, even if we run man coverage, we're going to be getting cooked either way because we don't have a pass rush. We don't have the guys to run man to man. So we might as well play cover 2, sit back, don't even blitz a ton, and just kind of wait for our opportunities and try to take advantage of when they come our way, and understand that we need to be a little bit more bend, don't break with this great offense on the other side of the ball. So I have no qualms with the job Dennis Allen did last year. I'm not going to sit here and act like it was an incredible coaching performance or that he did the impossible that we've seen from some other defensive coordinators. Just a rare select few, Brian Flores, maybe Jesse Minner with the Chargers, where you're looking at a roster somewhat similar to the Bears, and it's like, wow, they were actually kind of a handful to deal with. I'm not going to act like Dennis Allen really elevated this defense on a play-in, play-out basis. But again, I can't argue with the job he did. I had a lot of respect for him heading into the year, and he does still stand with really solid, favorable defensive coach rankings, where I have the Bears 10th to 17th for pass defense coaching and 11th to 18th for run defense coaching. Not going to sit here and say Dennis Allen is elite and he's the, Brian Flores to Ben Johnson's Kevin O'Connell, if you will. But I do think they're in really good hands with Dennis Allen, and hopefully at some point he can get more of like the types of defenders that he wants to be able to run the defense he wants to, because there were some times when, some select times when the Saints were able to equip him with the right bodies, where that defense gave opponents fits. I think someday we can get to that point, but without spoiling like the roster breakdown ahead, they still have a long way to go with this defensive roster. And perhaps that is a good transition to the roster breakdown portion of this video. Before we do make that transition to the roster breakdown, though, I got to thank the sponsor for today's deep dive, and that is SeatGeek. With NFL preseason picking up, if you want to go check out your team nice and early, SeatGeek has got you covered with the best prices, the best seat options for NFL preseason, and of course the NFL regular season after that. SeatGeek also has countless options for concerts this summer. Go enjoy the weather, listen to some good music. SeatGeek is the official partner of the MLB as well. So if you're like me and your baseball team, my Minnesota Twins are in the playoff hunt here. So if you want to go catch a ball game, SeatGeek's got you covered there as well. They have the best app, the best user interface. They make it nice and easy for you. They color code all their seats. So just look for those green dots. You're getting the best bang for your buck. They'll show you images of exactly what your seats are going to look like as well, which is a feature I love. SeatGeek's been an awesome partner of this channel for years. I'm super thankful for them sponsoring today's deep dive. And if you use code TFG10 at checkout, you will also save up to $20 on your next ticket purchase, on top of already getting the best prices on the best ticketing app already over at SeatGeek. So thanks, SeatGeek. And let's get back to the deep dive here, where it is time to talk about Caleb Williams. And I'm excited for this conversation, but I'm not excited for this conversation because after years of really hyping up Caleb, when he got drafted, I said, this is the first time that Packers fans have a reason to be afraid of the Bears, something I certainly didn't say when they drafted Justin Fields. I'm not going to act like I'm alone in hyping up Caleb Williams and thinking he's a phenomenal quarterback prospect. But I'm certainly right in line with the hype train on Caleb Williams. However, the reason I said I'm maybe a little bit less looking forward to this segment is I do have him ranked as the 16th overall quarterback heading into the season. And at this point in time, I think people are going to think that's too low, right? Like, he just came in 51st on the NFL top 100 list. He's the Madden cover athlete. He's on like everybody's top 10 quarterback lists right now. And anybody that's watched this series knows like this deep dive series is all about like proven floor, proven commodities. What have you accomplished to this point to receive the rankings that I give out for this series? And I do think ranking Caleb as a top 10 quarterback, the hype that he's at right now, which like the train has left the station, right? Like if you aren't on the Caleb Williams hype train by now, and I'm on it, like I am on it. I got my ticket nice and early. Like, believe me, I'm a big Caleb Williams guy. But what I think is happening is like the hype train is going, and it's, you know, people projecting what he could be this year. And I'm all for that in certain, you know, context and different conversations. And if you're trying to pick like who's going to make Pro Bowls this year and how are the Bears going to do and all this stuff, I'm all about that. But if we're talking about like from my perspective for the series, like what have you proven to this point? Where are we ranking you based on that? It's going to have to come in lower with Caleb Williams because he still has a lot of stuff to work on. We're still talking about a quarterback, whether you want to look at the film and talk about some of the stuff that he's got to work on, which I'm going to do in a second, or just look at some important quarterback measurables. Like he was 17th in EPA per play last year. He had the second highest uncatchable pass rate of all quarterbacks in the NFL last year. He was 35th out of 37 in completion percentage. And I know some people that have been around the channel be like, how are you going to sit there and use completion percentage to make your argument? I thought you hated completion percentage. I do. I hate when people use completion percentage to just drop that out there and say whether a quarterback is accurate or not. I actually think completion percentage says a lot more about a guy's processing and decision making and putting the ball in higher percentage looks than it does about whether a guy is accurate or not. Inaccurate throws will, of course, hurt your completion percentage, but especially looking at that as more of a like, are you making good decisions with the ball to have a higher percentage chance of completing passes? Being 35th out of 37th when you're only ahead of J.J. McCarthy and Shedeur Sanders, there's some stuff to look at and say there's some issues there, right? So there is a lot of underlying stuff with Caleb Williams by the metrics, and you load up the tape as well. And I definitely made sure to go watch Caleb Williams tape to not just talk out of my ass here, right? Like, granted, I watched every game thoroughly at least once during the season, but revisited the tape just to kind of keep it fresh and see what I saw. And here's what I'll say about Caleb Williams. He has got to eliminate the amount of wasted dropbacks on his tape. There is no doubt that this dude is stupid talented. I think Caleb Williams is at worst the second most gifted quarterback in the NFL in terms of combining athleticism, arm talent, playmaking ability, clutch factor, right? Like, dude, this guy, the clutch, you guys had eyeballs. You watched the NFL last year. This dude in the fourth quarter was Superman, right? But on a down-to-down basis with Caleb Williams, there's a lot of wasted dropbacks. And the biggest thing that stood out to me was how eager he is to force low percentage pass attempts. And I think it really stems from three different things with Caleb Williams. Number one, I do think there are times where he gets some tunnel vision and you want to see him be more efficient at saying, okay, that's not the best look. Let's get to read number two. This is not me saying he can't go through progressions or that there aren't examples of him doing it. That's why you can get excited about Caleb, because there's a lot of times where he does do it, but there's certainly plenty of examples on tape where he's zeroing in on one read a little bit too much. And I think that pairs with the other two things. The second thing is I think he has the confidence while he's looking at these more tight, either tight zone windows or tight man coverage, he has the confidence that he can make the perfect throw because he's got this stupid good arm. And I think number three too is he does seem to have to me like a willingness to just live for third or fourth down. And a lot of his pass attempts that lead to incompletions and that lower completion percentage are a lot of those like safe overthrows, right? And that's going to contribute to like the higher uncatchable pass rate. But you definitely feel him like it can be a 3rd and 6, and like you're inside the 50. He knows Ben Johnson's going to allow them to go for it on 4th down. There's a lot of times where he's putting the ball maybe up and away, or overthrows it a little bit away from the DB, where it's like it's either going to be his guy or nobody else, but realistically it's a safe throwaway to live for 4th down. And it's great that he can do that. He can have these, the cardiac Caleb moments, right? But a lot of that stems from 2nd, 3rd down decision making, that if it improves, you don't have to rely on that seemingly every single week as they did. So this is all like an in-depth look at his processing and decision making, which, to be more general about it, like, yeah, the processing and decision making just has to get better in that sense. He's got to make better decisions with the ball, not necessarily like turnover stuff. If anything, he's a little too safe with the ball at times. More just like make better decisions in terms of finding higher percentage passes, decisions with the ball to move the chains maybe a little bit earlier in the game or in the set of downs. So that's a big area for potential improvement this year. The other thing too is like, okay, I think the safe throwaways, that point I made where he's maybe leading guys intentionally, definitely plays into the lower completion percentage and that kind of stuff. But there's no denying, from having watched Caleb Williams as closely as I have, like, he's going to benefit a lot if he can improve his accuracy. And he's so talented that, like, he doesn't necessarily have to have like elite accuracy, but he is probably in the bottom 10 of starters in terms of the ball comes out of his hand. Do you trust that it's going to go to the right spot? Pretty much every NFL starting quarterback, like, they're in that position for a reason, right? They can throw an accurate football, and Caleb's no different in that sense. But if you're comparing him to other starting quarterbacks, he's probably in the bottom 10 in terms of like the ball left his hand. Are you confident it's going where it needs to? He'll make some incredible throws. Like, there's no denying that, but if he can just improve how consistently he's hitting his target, that's simply going to help. And it felt too like there were so many points in the season, and it felt especially like it was earlier in games where he comes out and he's kind of got that sugar high, and he's just like firing these piss missiles for some reason that just sail way over these guys' heads. And these are like open wide receivers too. These aren't like those safe throwaways I was talking about earlier. So the inaccuracy is an issue for him. And then there's a third area that did kind of stand out to me. It was smaller than our first 2 notes there, but like just the general like timing plays. Young quarterback, new offense, young receivers. There's definitely a decent amount of times on tape where he's just not quite on the same page with the receiver. More often than not, it's like where the ball's going in the middle of the field against zone coverage. Sometimes the receiver sits down and Caleb tries to lead him, or vice versa. There was the interception against the Packers in the playoffs where Caleb throws the dig, Luther Burden runs the out route. That's not even on Caleb. I'm just saying, like, that's opportunity for positive growth for Caleb to just connect more on the general like synchronization of the offense, if you will. Still a lot of area to improve there, and expected to see growth in that department. But those 3 areas really combined, again, just too many low percentage decisions with the football from Caleb, straight up inaccurate passes, and just sort of call them miscommunications. Those 3 combined to show you tape on Caleb Williams that from a down-to-down basis just had way too many wasted dropbacks, and you got to see him eliminate the amount of wasted dropbacks to become a more consistent, higher end, call it top 10 quarterback, in my opinion. Now, I'm expecting growth there, right? We saw, like, even if I'm dinging him for these things that were weaknesses on his tape last year, he took massive strides in some of these actual categories from his rookie season that had a lot more ugliness to it. So he's on that positive trajectory. He's in year 2 of a very complex Ben Johnson offense, right? I talked about the fact that this is a big playbook with, different threads pulled from all of these different styles of schemes and offenses around the league. there's a lot on Caleb's plate in a Ben Johnson offense. Like this was Jared Goff's playbook, right? One of the more cerebral timing throwers in the league. So like Caleb's going to get more comfortable with the playbook. He's working on things his own right. And it's not like he never goes through progressions. It's not like he can't throw balls with anticipation or on time. Like there's plenty of examples of that. And again, there were more examples of those really encouraging pro level NFL throws this season than there were in his rookie season. So the arrow is absolutely pointing up. I am fully on board with the hype. If he finishes the year as a like bona fide, surefire top 10 quarterback, call it a Pro Bowl's a joke, but call it an all-pro season. Call it a quarterback that drives this incredible offense and makes the Bears playoff contenders and is basically how people are discussing him right now, heading into the year already. If he finishes as that guy, I will not be the least bit surprised. And Bears fans, if you got to screen grab this and say, you idiot, you had him as the 16th quarterback heading into the year. He's a top 5 guy, you moron. Like, all right, got me, I guess. Like, I guess you just, didn't listen to the last 10 minutes or however long this spiel has been. But I will finish by saying this. I've already mentioned a couple of factors that would really suggest regression is coming the Bears' way. The turnovers on defense and a lot of the close game luck that this team did have last year. Granted, Caleb's ability to play hero ball and make batshit crazy plays is going to give this team a better chance at pulling these miraculous comebacks off. But it's still a dangerous territory to live on when that's every single week. And we did eventually see that run out against the Rams in the playoffs, right? But if you've got some pretty major indicators suggesting that this team is going to regress next year, the Bears' biggest weapon to combat that regression and slash it in the face and dance on its grave is Caleb Williams taking that next leap. They realistically had a very thin margin for error last year for a large variety of different reasons, but Caleb Williams' spotty play throughout the course of pretty much every single week was a big reason why their margin for error was thinner. If Caleb smooths things out, that margin for error really expands. So it's obviously important that Caleb does take another leap this year, heads closer to his upside projection. And for me, it's really just a question of how much progression we see from Caleb as opposed to if we see progression. I feel pretty damn confident that things are going to continue to get better here. But do we still start to see some of those areas of frustrations, even if it's at a slightly less rate? Or does he really weed them out? And we're talking about, my pro comp on Caleb Williams was always sports car Josh Allen. And Josh Allen, the first 2 years of his tape, had a lot of ugly moments with a lot of the same stuff, right? I love that was my pro comp on Caleb Williams. The difference is like Josh Allen is more of a, monster truck, and Caleb Williams, I think, is more speed-based in terms of his athletic ability. But otherwise, that's the pro comp. That's the upside. Josh Allen, well regarded as the best quarterback in the NFL, and he arrived at that point around year 3 or year 4. Look, I'll lead this segment and say, I don't think he's a top 10 quarterback yet, but I absolutely see a path for Caleb Williams to become where Josh Allen is at, where Patrick Mahomes is at, Lamar Jackson, these guys. It is all in there. It's so easy to watch him play and realize how unbelievably talented he is, right? It's more bringing up some of the stuff he does need to work on to be the guy that I think so many people expect him to be this year. So that's probably enough time on Caleb Williams. I'm just excited to watch it at this point. Obviously, though, gets the wild card icon for me. How much he develops is going to be the biggest factor in how far the Bears can go this year and beyond. As far as the backup quarterback is concerned, you do have Tyson Bagent. I do think, Caleb runs around a lot. If he sprains an ankle and you want to keep him out for a week or whatever, Tyson Bagent's a pretty good backup. He's even, there were some people saying, are the Jets or the Cardinals or the Dolphins going to trade for him and make him their starter this year? There was even some times in Caleb's rookie season, I was in Chicago hearing people at the bar saying like, Caleb sucks. We got to go to Tyson Bagent. That's a different story and a different point in time. But, he's played some good ball at times. And I think he could keep this team alive, especially with a Ben Johnson at the helm. If you need a win here or a win there, there's much less fascinating quarterbacks out there in the league. And I also like having Case Keenum around here. Why not, as a clipboard holder and kind of an additional QB coach at times. So 16th heading into the season. Certainly don't expect that that's where the Bears finish. It's more just how much higher do they climb as this season goes on. But while Caleb Williams' development is probably the most important factor for this team this season, obviously the rest of this team matters as well. So let's keep going through this roster. We're going to go to the backfield next. And as far as offseason changes are concerned, at running back, not a lot going on. No losses. And they do get Roschon Johnson back, who actually was injured for most of last season. Honestly, hand up, I had forgotten that. I just assumed that he just didn't get his touches because Kyle Monangai was so sweet, but he actually was injured. So he gets brought back into the mix here. Why not? But overall, still saying neutral at running back. And also just to cover all my bases, because I was so excited, so motivated to talk about Caleb Williams that I skipped their offseason changes at QB, where clearly they didn't make any changes there too. So neutral so far. Through quarterback, coaching, and running back. But anyway, as we take a deeper look at this backfield, this is just a really solid duo at this point with DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai. Now, a duo that, I don't feel the need to sit here and forecast top 10 upside, or that this is going to be some incredible backfield that elevates this run game in the ways that some of the many elite backs in the NFL do. But the Bears do come in a cluster that does rank what feels low, 21st to 27th at running back. But the reality is there's a lot of great backs in the league and a lot of backfields like this that are going to allow a great play caller, and as we'll see with this offensive line, keep the floor high enough here that you can still have a really high-end dynamic run game, even if you don't have necessarily a superstar back, right? And I feel just really good about this duo at this point. And part of that is DeAndre Swift settling in and playing his best ball in Chicago. I've been really hard on DeAndre Swift, whether it's here in Chicago, in Philly, even at times in Detroit. He's had some really frustrating vision issues. And I'm not going to say they're all gone necessarily, but I do think they were able to, and Eric Bieniemy actually gets a lot of credit for helping these guys come along last year as one of the best running backs coaches in the league. And now I'm actually really kicking myself for not putting that in the coaching losses segment. I don't often consider RB coaches leaving when I get there, but we're just going to keep things moving here and bake that in here. But I do think the work that Bieniemy did last year has played its course. I'm not expecting these guys to be bad now that Bieniemy's not here. But either way, Swift's development was real nice here, man. He was getting north and south more, much more committal with his running back decision making, a little bit less bouncy. You don't want Swift to lose all of that bounciness. It's part of what makes him so explosive and able to bring those big plays to the table. But there are times where you need him to just trust the blocking, hit the hole with pacing, and run north and south, and take on linebackers and bring a physical element to the table. It was really impressive, the style and ability that Swift was running with last year, to the point that I feel really good about him, especially in a split backfield. If you're still going to have questions about Swift's history of consistently hitting the right hole at the right time, having consistent vision, to pair him with a Kyle Monangai for what Monangai did last year and was really as a prospect, but to show that his game translates to the NFL, because really the only question about Monangai was, is he too slow to be a good back in the NFL? And he showed last year that no, that's not the case. In fact, he runs so hard and his vision is really good in the sense of like trusting his blockers and hitting holes really hard. He does play fast, man. I mean, it tops out pretty quick, but the burst into the hole, it can be noticeable. Like, he does have some juice, even if the long speed stalls out. But yeah, this dude runs so hard. He's got the same running style that Isaiah Pacheco also had coming out of Rutgers, where like he wants to punish the ground beneath his feet with every step, and that just leads to a really violent running style. But I think Monangai has much better vision than Isaiah Pacheco. So, I do put the up arrow on Kyle Monangai, even though I said, like, I'm not going to sit here and await top 10 upside with this backfield. But I think coming out of that rookie season, Monangai can be something close to what David Montgomery was, like, obviously for this Bears team, but for Chicago, for Detroit as well, with this Ben Johnson focused backfield. DeAndre Swift in the lightning back mold, the Sonic back role, with the Sonic and Knuckles backfield being recreated here in Chicago in many ways. DeAndre Swift is not Jahmyr Gibbs and never will be Jahmyr Gibbs, but he can do a lot of that stuff and bring some of those explosives to the table. And Swift is a really nice third down back compared to Kyle Monangai that is much less proven there. Swift, even to his credit, is an okay pass blocker. But I will say this, Roschon Johnson coming back from injury this year, I like his third down stuff. Like, I think he's a good pass blocker. He's got smooth hands. He had to do that in college, like be some of the third down, like do some of the third down backfield dirty work with Bijan coming off the field. So hanging in there in pass pro and being a check and release guy, like, he's got experience doing it. So I don't see a reason why Roschon couldn't get into the mix and still be, pretty efficient with his touches, largely as a third down back, and just help out this backfield even more. But to me, I see it as a really effective, call it thunder and lightning, baby Sonic, baby Knuckles approach here in Chicago that really settled in last year and should be good again this year. And then I should mention some of the other depth beyond the guys I actually anticipating touching the ball in this backfield, like Britton Brown, Coleman Bennett, a pair of undrafted types that I'm not too familiar with. Savon Ahmed, if Swift did get hurt, Ahmed does have good speed and has had some good runs, running a lot of outside zone and stuff. So stash him on the practice squad. If Swift gets banged up, maybe he goes into that kind of lightning mold. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, though. Ultimately, you are left with, again, a good backfield, one that is going to help provide a good floor for this run game, but maybe not necessarily drive it forward as this incredible backfield either. But let's move forward to the weaponry, the wide receiver, tight end, pass catchers here. And first take a look at their offseason changes. And this was one of the big decisions that this team made this offseason, sending DJ Moore to the Buffalo Bills for a second-round pick. And with that second-round pick, actually, they moved around in the draft a little bit, and one of their additions shows up with that pick with Sam Roush, was effectively what they swapped for DJ Moore, including the cap relief. But definitely a downgrade to me, losing DJ Moore, who had his ups and downs with Bears fans last year, I think, but still a really good wide receiver, no longer in the building here. Not so much with Olamide Zaccheaus, who did play 47% of their snaps last year, but did not play them well. He had a lot of frustrating drops, so not much of a loss there, especially when you look at the additions of a Khalif Raymond, who does the same stuff Zaccheaus does, but better, and a third rounder in that same mold in Xavier Thomas, who Ben Johnson at least likes, though I thought was a pretty major overdraft. Beyond that, the only other notable move is going to be Durham Smythe, who was a tight end 3 for this team, is out the door. So I said downgraded it wide receiver with the DJ Moore loss, neutral at tight end for now, mainly because, like, am I really going to call Sam Roush, who's going to be a tight end 3 this year, am I going to call that an upgraded tight end room? Very minimally upgraded, I suppose, but not enough for me to say upgraded at tight end for the 2026 Bears necessarily. But let's look at this group here. And next to Caleb Williams, this group of weapons is also the biggest wild card, in my opinion, for the Bears, which goes in many ways hand in hand with Caleb's performance himself. But you are really betting on essentially all your recently highly drafted guys here. A couple of first rounders in Adunze and Loveland and Luther Burden, who was a high second round pick. And these guys are exciting, but as is the nature of this series, a little bit more unproven stepping into some of these roles. And we're going to need to see some combination of these guys prove themselves and step up if these pass catchers can be a driving force behind what I think a lot of people are hoping will be one of the best offenses in the league. And I definitely think all three of these guys are critically important. But I do think that the biggest pivotal factor, the biggest, I guess, elite impact to potential disappointment, and just overall the biggest wild card factor here is Luther Burden, who has to step up now, really outside of the gadget role that now Khalif Raymond and Xavier Thomas are going to operate, and step into the true wide receiver one role here, which is, that's going to be a big ask for a very talented young wide receiver in Luther Burden. And you know who's not going to complain about that is Luther Burden. Probably really excited about that opportunity. We know Ben Johnson loves him. Ben Johnson all but ran DJ Moore out of town because he thinks Luther Burden can be a better version of DJ Moore, who ironically my pro comp on Luther Burden was DJ Moore before he ended up a Chicago Bear. So it's all very fitting. But Burden does have to go from a player that, even back to his time at Missouri, but last year as well, he has been asked with being much more of a gadget and designed open route type of guy. It's just true. He's had a ton of screen targets. A lot of his vertical shots are coming off of, like a flea flicker or a play action crossing route where the scheme is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting. And that followed him back to a Missouri offense that, I'll just be honest, didn't have the verticality in it to unleash a Luther Burden in more of a number one, call it X or route running Z role that DJ Moore had to play for this team last year. And this to me is the classic example of a what can you do versus what are you asked to do. Burden, to me, he's got size. I think he shows plenty of snappiness in his routes. I think he will be able to get open. For me, I think the biggest question mark on Luther Burden is going to be how well does he play through contact both in those routes? Because as good of a route runner as you can be, you're still going to deal with some scrappy physical coverage against number one corners. How well can he push off and fight through contact and continue to accelerate through contact? Not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying he's going to have to prove more in that sense. But especially in terms of, when you are the X, you are the number one wide receiver, a lot of times it's coming down to you got to go make a catch. You got to outmuscle a DB. You got to have reliable hands. You got to be in the right place at the right time and play physical. There were moments with Luther Burden, even in that rookie season, where he had his fair share of drops. 6 of them to be exact on 72 targets. That's over a 10% drop rate. That is not good. That is 1 out of 10 times we throw you the ball, you're not securing the catch. And because, like I said, his role was either, gadget throws, bubble screens, quick, manufactured touches, or Ben Johnson doing a really good job using his athleticism to scheme him open. He only saw 1 contested catch target last year. He didn't come down with it. But he literally doesn't have a contested catch win charted in his NFL career at this point. And I mentioned right place, right time. He did cost Caleb Williams an interception in that Packers playoff game because he ran the wrong route. So that's the extent of negative that I want to say on Luther Burden. I'm just bringing it up because talk about a Caleb Williams hype train that has coincided with a Luther Burden hype train. I'm just saying there are areas with his game that could be I guess warning signs that maybe he's a little bit disappointing stepping into this role. That's not necessarily what I'm predicting, but that's why he's such a wild card, right? Because there's some things he's got to prove. But I do want to end on a positive note with Luther Burden because he was a phenomenal prospect. I'm kicking myself because I think like most people did, bought into this very large wave of, let's just call it bad draft PR. Like, I initially had him as a top 10 player in that draft class. And then just like week after week after week, it's like, Luther Burden's got off-field concerns. He's a diva. You don't want to draft him that high. And, I still had a first-round grade on him. I still really liked him as a prospect. I did admittedly lower his grade a little bit after just time and time and time again, hearing about people closer to him complaining about that kind of stuff. I think Burden deserves a lot of credit for that not surfacing in his rookie season. He had every reason coming in as the wide receiver 4 to be a diva, to, Ben Johnson gave him a lot of tough love early on, and he had every reason to kind of go in the opposite direction, and it was not. Like, he responded well to having to kind of prove himself and earn those targets and earn Ben Johnson's trust. So, like, total credit to Luther Burden. I think the, off-field diva reports, until proven otherwise, were bullshit. But despite the sidebar there, like, Luther Burden, awesome prospect, like, genuinely elite run after catch skills coming out. He does have, maybe once every 2 drafts, you'll see a wide receiver prospect that has the combination of speed, burst, agility, change of direction skills that he does have. He's bigger with that. So, like, he can actually break tackles, make guys miss. He's just got great instincts with the ball in his hands. There's a reason Missouri and Chicago have tried to just get the ball in his hands on quick manufactured touches. And all the flashes are there in terms of route running. And in college, when they did have him go down the field, he did win some impressive catches. So I know it's in there. We just haven't seen it from him as a Bear quite yet. So, I wanted to start with some of the things that he's going to have to prove, but also end with the positive light of, like, if you get the right side of the coin, if he hits the green lights, Luther Burden could be a special, special player inside a special offense. Break out as one of the most productive receivers in the NFL. I've brought up DJ Moore a lot. I still like that as a comp. DJ Moore spent some time as a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. I think the way Burden moves, there's a little CeeDee Lamb in there, like, as an even higher end part of the comp equation there. But the Bears obviously know how much upside this guy has. They're damn near staking the fate of their passing game on his shoulders. So we'll see if Burden can handle that. And a big reason I see it that way, that Burden is that important, is I'm just not as high on Rome Odunze's upside here, and I never really was, especially after 2 years in the NFL, and he's kind of just been a guy, which was part of my fear with him. Like, I always thought his ball skills and, like, just his character, like, he's just wired the right way. He had all these impressive contested catch wins in college. He gets the most out of what athleticism he does have with route running technique, and, he's physical, pushing off routes and stuff. But as we know, it's a lot harder to consistently win contested catches like he did in college at the next level. And he just hasn't been that great at it. There were some really encouraging moments from it in his rookie season, but last year, 7 for 20, 8 missed tackles forced in his career. That was another thing, was like, in college, he did a good job catching quick passes, making guys miss, picking up some tough yards after the catch. There hasn't really been a whole lot of rack. He's had drops too. He's had 10 drops in his first 2 seasons, like 9% drop rate. Not good for a guy that you drafted to be a reliable, like, possession receiver. I think if the ball skills get better, which I don't know if you can count on at this point, he'll be a better player than, like, the 77 rating I've got on him, but I don't think he'll be a ton better. I think he's been a pretty good wide receiver. He's been north of 700 yards both years. Yeah, he battled with some injuries last year. It's the NFL. It's going to happen. I don't know. While he's young and while he was highly drafted, it's easy to get sucked into, like, oh, he can be so much more. He can be this great impact on this offense. I more look at it like, I largely know what he is. I think he can be a solid third member of this group of targets as a possession guy, with Luther Burden really moving all over the place, you can ask Odunze to run digs and comebackers and work the short to intermediate game, hopefully be that reliable option for Caleb, be in the right place at the right time, get his 750 yards or whatever it is. But like ultimately, I didn't actually put the up arrow on Rome Odunze. I did put the wild card eye on him because technically if he just becomes like this monster ball winner and rediscovers like some of the stuff he did at Washington against college DBs, there is still a sprinkle of him being better than I'm kind of discussing him as. Ultimately, I think the floor's pretty nice. I think he was, at this point, we can probably say overdrafted a decent amount, but still a pretty solid wide receiver overall. And at this point, I'll put the ball in Odunze's court to show that he's got more like upside than that. But actually, Colston Loveland is at worst the number 2 target in this passing game. If he leads this team in targets, I wouldn't be stunned. I think ideally that will still be Burden. But yeah, Loveland was incredible in his rookie season. And he's not just a tight end. The Bears actually did run the 5th most heavy personnel last year, the 5th most 12 personnel and 13 personnel, by the way. A good note for when we get to Sam Roush. But the reason they did that and were able to do that is because Colston Loveland is legitimately good as a slot wide receiver, and they're able to force teams into personnel decisions on, when you come out there with Loveland and Kmet, you got to make a decision. Do you match that in base or do you match that in nickel? And if you match this in base, or if you just decide to put a linebacker on him, I mean, he really showed down the stretch that he will terrorize whoever is in your intermediate pass coverage. And it's not just linebackers. Like he's too big and even too fast at times for a lot of NFL safeties too. And when you're able to start weaponizing him as a mismatch problem and put that schematic flexibility in the hands of someone like Ben Johnson, well, we started to see, especially in the second half of last year, like why Ben Johnson thought so high of Loveland, that they drafted him as high as they did. And we saw how big of an impact he can make here. I mean, where do you start with him, dude? Like he is just so impressive to me. And I liked him as a prospect, but I'm higher on him now than I was on him coming out of Michigan, mainly because he bulked up. We talk so much about like, oh, if this tight end could just add 10 pounds and keep his athleticism, that'd be amazing. And then so often it doesn't happen, or sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years. Loveland, it was like 3 months. He's like, yep, I'm good. I put on 10 pounds and kept my speed, and boom. Like that was so important, not just from a blocking perspective, where I always thought Loveland had a good baseline of run blocking technique, but that extra 10 pounds really helps him. A lot of these, whatever you want to call them, the 11 and a half tight end, the half tight end, half wide receiver guy, whether that's Brock Bowers or like Kenyon Sadiq now for the Jets. There's a bunch of these guys that the teams try to do this idea with and put defenses into a formational bind, if you will. A lot of those guys don't have like legit inline size and blocking ability, though. In fact, most of them don't. So the fact that now you're talking about someone that can actually put his hand in the dirt, dig out DNs, continue to get better as a blocker. Like he wasn't perfect in his rookie season, but damn good at it, and should continue to get better at it. You do want to come out in nickel because you're so scared of Colston Loveland dicing you up through the air as he's capable of. Sorry, now we have legit heavy personnel, 2 full-size tight ends out there to beat you up in your face. So that's awesome. But yeah, dude, the fact that he did bulk up, and honestly, I think he developed as a route runner. I thought he showed a lot of like flashes as a route runner at Michigan, but some reps were better than others. I think in terms of pacing his routes, the footwork, pushing off where he needs to, appropriately speaking, really good. The hands were incredible. That wasn't so much a question. He had some questionable ball skills moments when he was dealing with the shoulder injury in his final year at Michigan. So that was kind of a note on his scouting report, was like, well, he was dealing with an injury that would impact contested catches, but he is playing a little bit softer at the catch point on tape when he was dealing with that injury. So it's hard to know how much of that was going to show up. But it really didn't. He also only had 2 drops all season long, and one of them came in the snow in the playoff game against the Rams. So an incredibly reliable, big-bodied target for Caleb, who, like I said, like the accuracy can be a little bit off. To have such a big target with such a big catch radius, that's only going to help. He's awesome. And ultimately, like, okay, he had 70 catches, 906 yards. He was awesome down the stretch. He gets an 84 rating for me, despite like not even really playing for the first third of this season. You guys know how it goes. I'm not going to come out and make Colson Loveland a 95 rating out the gate and bake that into the weapons equation. But he absolutely could be that guy this year, 100%. I'm not gonna question if that's possible for him. And honestly, like the tight end 1 crown is a little bit up for grabs right now. So I could see Loveland being that level of player, maybe like somewhere between where, say, George Kittle and Travis Kelce are. A better blocker than Kelce, but maybe not quite the receiving entity, I guess. And maybe a little bit more dynamic as a receiver than George Kittle, but not quite as good of a blocker, like maybe somewhere in between that line. Yeah, the sky is the literal limit. Just got to go out and do it. So Loveland's special. I definitely think either him or Burden are going to lead this team in receiving yards. And if Burden struggles, it's almost certainly going to be Loveland, in my opinion, because I'm just not that high on Odunze being a massive part of the equation here, though I'm willing to at least put the wild card icon on there and give him one more year to maybe prove me wrong. Just not betting on it. Definitely, like I said, though, it's all about these 3 guys and Caleb Williams becoming the best version of themselves together. And then how quickly does that happen as well? Does it all click into place this year? These are all very young players. Does it take another year to really get to that point? It's all so important. And it does make the rest of this conversation with these weapons a little bit shorter because they don't have a ton of depth that I'm overly excited about in terms of pass catchers. You do have Cole Kmet, who I do like Cole Kmet's role now as a tight end too. That's always really how I've felt about Cole Kmet, is he's just been okay as a starter. You know, big, strong-handed tight end, pretty solid after the catch, pretty good blocker, and admittedly he got even better as a blocker last year, I think. But you almost immediately see like what a more dynamic tight end looks like compared to what Cole Kmet has been for so long here in Chicago at this point. But of course, this team runs a lot of heavy personnel. Cole Kmet, I would think, almost certainly will have more snaps than, especially because Xavier Thomas and Khalif Raymond, that's probably going to look something like what we saw last year with Zacchaeus being where Raymond's at and Xavier Thomas kind of being where Burden was at. Like, those guys will probably split, and we'll talk about what they bring to the table here, but I would think Cole Kmet probably will be 4th in total snaps. So that's why he's up there, but I really like him plugging in as just the tight end 2. Like, he's automatically one of the better tight end 2s in the league, and definitely is good enough to open up the idea that their 12 personnel is very frustrating to deal with. You do have DeAndre Swift, who's excellent in the screen game and bringing his explosiveness to the table in the types of touches he'll get there, of course. And then, yeah, you have the gadget role that, you know, I still think Luther Burden is going to get his fair share of these design touches, as he should, similar to the fact that DJ Moore continued to get some bubble screens and stuff last year and was strangely inefficient with them. But yeah, like, you have Khalif Raymond, Xavier Thomas, both in what we definitely know at this point is the gadget speed role in Ben Johnson's offense. So a ton of design quick touches on jet sweeps, bubble screens, that kind of stuff. And then the occasional like vertical manufactured open type of routes. It can happen on flea flickers, different play action combinations where it's really just like run fast and please catch the ball when you're down the field because I'm going to get you open. Is kind of the idea from Ben Johnson there. So Khalif Raymond, we know, can do that. He's done it in Detroit, and obviously, like, they bring him in here before they get to the draft and decide to see if Xavier Thomas can do it. So kind of the same idea where they had Alemedy Zaccheaus there last year and end up with Luther Burden into that role eventually. Raymond is a better player than Zaccheaus, in my opinion, but you kind of know what you're getting there. Xavier Thomas, on the other hand, this is one of those picks that gets really challenging as a draft analyst, where everything about this pick says he's not much of a football player. This was a reach. You're overdrafting a 40 time. That's kind of what this pick screams. Yet you trust Ben Johnson so much at this point that maybe he does just know what he's doing, right? And you better believe it. This was a Ben Johnson pick. I'm not going to put this one on Ryan Poles. Of course, Ryan Poles had to green light it, but Ben Johnson is looking for that speed player, and Xavier Thomas was the one they go with here in the third round. I mean, that's a legitimate draft pedigree, right? That's a pretty major investment in Xavier Thomas. This is what I'll say. He didn't have drop issues. That's good. That's something you're going to worry about with smaller wide receivers. And to be fair, LSU did have too many chefs in the kitchen. They had like 5 wide receivers in this draft class. So I'm at least open to the concept that LSU just never really let these guys settle in and build their own momentum and let any of these guys really stand out. So I'm keeping an open mind, but this was not a highly perceived draft prospect. Did not produce. The ball is really in Ben Johnson's court to show us that there's something here. Now, if he just becomes Khalif Raymond and they do an excellent job scheming him up and he didn't have drop issues and you're like, you know what? I know what I can get out of that. And he turns into Khalif Raymond and you get 4 cheap years of that at the, later part of the third round. Worse things could come of that. Did you have to draft Xavier Thomas in the third round? Was he going to be there in the 4th or 5th? Yeah, probably. We'll just have to see what he turns into. Ultimately, between him and Raymond, you definitely have that role figured out because the floor is high enough with Raymond, and Thomas is fast. If he can prove to get those snaps and opportunities, there might be something there. You do have Jahdae Walker, who was undrafted, has good size, good speed, profiles more as a vertical threat. And I think, they're very thoughtful about like the competitions they create, the types of skill sets they're looking for here. It's pretty clear to see like, okay, Raymond and Thomas are the same skill set. Walker and Scotty Miller. Scotty Miller's been a kind of thin vertical threat in the NFL. Who once upon a time had his role in a Tom Brady passing game, right? So like these guys are your taller, long striding vertical threats to compete into that sort of mold. Which I'm not saying either of them are Jamison Williams, but that would be probably the skill set that would be, I suppose, parallel to what those guys do well. I will say outside of maybe Jahdae Walker, who did make some tough catches in a very small opportunity last year, you don't really have a like real wide receiver if some injuries happen. Like if Burden or Odunze get hurt, who are you actually going to have like out there running routes in your third down drop back game to like get open and make tough catches? Like maybe Jahdae Walker surprises there, but we know it's not Scotty Miller. It's not really Khalif Raymond. It's probably not going to be Xavier Thomas. So you're pretty thin in that regard. Something to keep an eye on if injuries start to stack up here, but hopefully they can avoid that. As far as remaining players here, you have Sam Roush was a 3rd round pick. We're back to the tight end room now. And I definitely think the plan is to let Kmet's contract expire and let Roush start as a tight end 3, as one of the better tight end 3s in the league, clean up some of the stuff in his game, and eventually become just masterful tight end 2 next to Colston Loveland. Really like the fit. So Roush got some late draft hype, and I was really excited to watch his tape because he's usually the type of tight end that I adore. Like 270 pounds, like tough guy to bring down after the catch, decent enough speed. I just straight up, like, I did actually walk away a little underwhelmed by the tape. I thought he was really uncoordinated as a blocker, even though you saw the high end blocks, certainly. And honestly, just like really stiff finding the football. You really have to keep him moving forward. Anytime he had to slow down or turn around, adjust for the catch, or even like win body positioning and win contested catches, he really struggled at it. So like there's a skill set to develop that I do like. And could he be something like Jackson Hawes in Buffalo is what I think a lot of people are looking for there. You know, Jackson Hawes' blocking tape in college was night and day compared to Sam Roush. Like, Roush has a long way to go to be what Jackson Hawes is as a blocker. That's like the best case scenario, but can he be what John Bates is for the Commanders, Josh Oliver for the Vikings, that role? That's probably the plan. And I think he can develop into that, but he does need to develop. So I see how he fits. And I actually do agree, like, because at first I was like, oh, bye-bye Cole Kmet. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, well, they do run 13 personnel, and he'll get to play in those roles. But he probably, like, I did have those questions on him on tape. Like, realistically, he probably needs a year before he gets significant playing time. Hopefully that year can be well used, and then you're really ready to hit the ground running with him in the Cole Kmet role in 2027. Not really anybody else after that at tight end. So there are your Bears pass catchers. I don't think I said this earlier, but they did come out ranking 18th to 22nd for pass catchers in this NFL, which is a very solid ranking. Like, obviously these guys are young and still have to go out and prove it, and there's a ton of upside for them to climb up in these rankings. But with how the nature of this series goes, it shouldn't be a huge surprise that they were more towards the middle of the league than, let's just say, what their upside could be, which could be a top 10 group of pass catchers even as early as this year. So we'll see if they can be that big of an impact for the Bears. But we have one more position group for this offense to discuss, the offensive line. And as we look at their offseason changes, they had a big one, and an unexpected one at that, as Drew Dahlman retires, surprisingly, for this team after making a Pro Bowl and being an incredible signing for this team. That was a big loss for this team. And their immediate pivot was to trade for the veteran Garrett Bradbury. They also invested significant draft capital, a second-round pick on Logan Jones. And then at tackle, they also add Jedrick Wills into the mix here, who took a year off last season. So I did ultimately say downgraded on the offensive line, and I don't think that's controversial when Drew Dahlman played as well as he did. They pivoted to the best of their ability, as we'll discuss here, and they're not doomed on the offensive line, but it's a blow, and I think any Bears fan would admit that. But this is still a very good-looking offensive line. While they almost certainly would be in the top 5 if they had Drew Dahlman coming off of what he did last year, they still ranked 9th for me. So they landed the plane all right here. And honestly, a part of this too is, yes, they did lose Drew Dahlman, and obviously I'm calling that a downgrade, but their left tackle situation should be better. Like it's gonna be hard to be worse. So let's start at that left tackle spot. And, you know, you could argue that Braxton Jones could have been in that offseason changes graphic as an addition. It was kind of a cloudy season for him coming off the 2024 injury. played a little bit, was kind of benched, and then he was, hurt but available and then not available. It was just kind of a weird, wasted season for Braxton Jones after the team kind of made efforts to try and replace him, knowing he was heading into a contract year. They draft Trapillo in the second. It was a weird year for Braxton Jones, but we're back here with him as a chance to hold on to this job and potentially become their franchise left tackle, which kind of felt like the trajectory we were on with him a couple of years ago. But then since the 2024 injury, that plan, that clearly has not been the plan. And if Ozzy Trapillo never got hurt last year, Jones almost certainly would be out the door. Regardless, though, I'm interested to see what he can do this year. I liked him when he was healthy. I think he's underrated as an athlete. He's a small school, 6th round pick, one of these players that's constantly fighting against his draft pedigree and having to prove himself. And I think there was a little bit of that, new staff comes in and kind of bets against him. So he's always got to prove himself, but I think he's really athletic. He has some really good blocks as a move blocker, sweeps, screen game. I thought Ben Johnson would really like that aspect of his tape. So I think there is a lot of potential for him to kind of get into Ben Johnson's favor and be oh man, yeah, if this guy's healthy, he's a legit unit for us. The pass protection's solid for him. He's got all the traits that you look for. Generally pretty good technique. Just, the anchor can get away from him at times. He can take his losses missing with his hands or stopping his feet or whatever. He's not a lockdown player as a pass blocker, and he's not an consistently elite run blocker either. But I do think if he can get back healthy, I do think Braxton Jones is a starting caliber, solid left tackle, kind of in the, the Rasheed Walker, Jermaine Illuminor category of, you don't want that to be your best offensive lineman, but you can pay him and be just fine with it. Maybe Orlando Brown in that category as well. But there is certainly no guarantee that he will play at that level because, again, he was dealing with this frustrating injury last year. And, there's not a lot of momentum for Braxton Jones right now. So we'll see if he wins this job, if he stays healthy. How does he play? He's a total wild card there at left tackle. Now they have other options. They have Jedrick Wills, who's honestly kind of in a similar spot of Braxton Jones. Although Wills was a first-round pick, he's had very frustrating times throughout his career, and Cleveland was very eager to just move on from him. And I would say Braxton Jones has actually played better than Jedrick Wills has at their best. But Wills has still had, some moments of being a serviceable starter. He took last year off. Clearly his body wasn't right because a guy like him who hasn't fully sucked at left tackle as a former first rounder, his opportunity is going to be just around the corner as soon as he's ready. So he's interesting in the sense of he's got some tools. Was probably better earlier in his career. So if there was an injury that he just needed a full calendar year to just get his body right, maybe he can surprise here and be this kind of sneaky good pickup for the Bears. And maybe too, you could look at it, perhaps a more realistic outlook is all right, if Braxton Jones can't go, or if he really is, struggling and isn't what we think he is, maybe Jedrick Wills can be more of a floor raiser for us until Ozzy Trapillo hopefully gets healthy. And that's another wild card here is Ozzy Trapillo, 2nd round pick last year, played really well. He really did. And I was impressed. I very quickly understood the vision. And, I didn't see Ozzy Trapillo as a super high upside prospect. I thought he was maybe going to be a low floor starter potentially. Just not overly athletic or overly traitsy or anything like that. But I liked what he did in his rookie year, really in both phases. And he suffers a torn patellar tendon, which is typically a season ender, and he might not be available to play all year, right? That's why they bring back Braxton Jones and add Jedrick Wills to the mix. But modern medicine's a miracle. And we saw the Chiefs' 1st round pick last year wasn't supposed to play much in his rookie year, and he's out there for week one in Josh Simmons. So like maybe Ozzie Trapillo beats the odds and gets back out there at some point. And then we can ideally get back on a momentum train for him as a good draft pick. But like, he's also in that category of first he's got to get healthy, prove that he's healthy, and then establish what type of player are we talking about here in terms of how good he is. Because it was still 6 starts in his rookie season. We still have a lot to learn about Ozzie Trapillo and if some of those more physical limitations are going to hold him back at times or not. You do have Theo Benedet, who had to be their quote unquote most like at least available option for them at left tackle last year. Really not a good pass blocker. That's the issue with him. Pretty easy to get your wins against, but they clearly like his athleticism and run blocking ability in a Ben Johnson run game. They had him out there running like routes at times. I think he was the one they threw a pass to in the Packers game and it clanked off his face mask. So like he's a great athlete, but the play strength is certainly a concern for him. But I don't think you want to get to a point where you're starting Theo Benedet, but he does have some starting experience, I suppose. But that's your left tackle situation. It's very much in flux. That's the big question mark on this offensive line. The rest of this conversation is probably a lot quicker. Center, we'll have some discussions, but like, okay, you got Joe Thuney at left guard. The only question mark on him is he's going to be 34 years old this year, so Father Time is undefeated. When does regression come for him? It'll happen eventually, but it didn't happen last year, right? He had one of his best years in pass protection. He is just running through my mind, but yeah, he is the best pass blocking guard in the NFL. An incredible acquisition to be able to get him. Not quite the run blocker as a pass blocker, but he's obviously smart and tough, and he's pretty good in that phase as well. So, Joe Thuney, as long as he doesn't regress, is a top 2 or 3 guard in the NFL. You love that. Let's come back to center and talk about the other locked in pieces. Jonah Jackson at right guard, he bounced back really well as well. Like, man, I honestly, this was the piece when I talked about their offensive line last year. This was the piece that I thought was not going to live up to really what they paid to acquire him. Not draft capital, but they had to give him a lot of money. And he really struggled in pass pro with the Rams. He had been benched. He struggled. He wasn't that good in pass pro for the Lions. And, he wasn't great in pass pro for the Bears, but he was good enough that you didn't have to worry about it a ton. And he settled back in a Ben Johnson run game, kicking ass, taking names. So he's back locked and loaded as a quality starting right guard. You feel really good about what you're getting there. And then Darnell Wright at right tackle. Really, the only question here is whether or not you put the green up arrow on him and expect him to get even better. I think he's likely, like, realistically reached his ceiling as a Pro Bowl right tackle, one of the better right tackles in the league. He made second team All-Pro last year. I don't think he's an amazing pass blocker. He's a very good one. Obviously, a very challenging player to go through. He's 330 pounds and one of the stronger offensive linemen in the league. You do see him lose against the more athletic, gifted, like, pass rushers. And I do wonder if, like, we've reached the extent of what his movement skills, when he gets left on an island, the extent of what he's capable there. I mean, he's definitely one of the best run blocking linemen in the NFL. And I think that's why he gets the All-Pro nod, is like you end up with a bunch of guys that are kind of clustered together and amazing at what they do. But at least Darnell Wright's like run blocking really stood out as kind of Penei Sewell-esque last year. And they weaponized him just like Ben Johnson did with Penei Sewell. Like as a puller, just mashing guys at the line, you name it, he was incredible. So I'm not trying to take away his All-Pro nod or anything like that. I get it. He's one of the more fun highlight reels for an offensive lineman for pretty much anybody not named Penei Sewell from last year. So you've got that at right tackle, feeling damn good about that. At center now, there will be probably a bit of a position battle. We'll see. Like, I'm feeling pretty good it's going to be Garrett Bradbury for now. Like, I think you know what you're getting there. The Bears knew what they were getting when they traded for him. They weren't acquiring him expecting him to be Drew Dahlman, but clearly they want that athletic center because Logan Jones is in the same archetype as the undersized move center. That's Garrett Bradbury. And we know Bradbury blocking wide zone is still a really good reach blocker, will fit the system, doesn't have the play strength that Drew Dahlman proved to have last year. And in pass protection, if teams are able to isolate Garrett Bradbury, you're going to end up with some really ugly moments. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of Bears fans remember taking advantage of Garrett Bradbury when he was starting all those years for the Vikings. You know what you're getting there, but I think that's why you start him, because the floor is at least solid. You're not asking a rookie center, even if Logan Jones is a 24-year-old rookie center, he played at Iowa, so it's not like he was the center for this dynamic passing game or anything like that. But there is something to be said about calling protections, having a veteran in there that's played as many snaps as he has, not rocking the boat, and just letting Logan Jones earn it and develop and take his time to get in there. Maybe they just love Logan Jones so much that they go that route. I will be honest, I thought Logan Jones was drafted a little bit early. I definitely see someone that could be something like a Garrett Bradbury, where he can move, he can have a good floor as a center in the NFL. I think if I'm taking a center in the second round, I want someone that's got better play strength and a higher upside projection than what I see in Logan Jones personally. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he turns into an absolute superstar. I would be a little bit surprised though. I really thought that I really saw him struggle to displace even Big Ten defensive linemen. And I do question if he's going to be able to handle the play strength aspect consistently at the NFL level to be a great center. Now, I would say the same thing about Garrett Bradbury, struggling to handle the play strength aspect. If he turns into Garrett Bradbury as a late second round pick, you're not really going to complain about that. But I do think it was fascinating. You have Garrett Bradbury here. Were there other needs you could have addressed? That was more of a draft grades conversation or anything like that. But in time, if you look back on it and eventually Garrett Bradbury walks here and Logan Jones becomes something like that, ultimately a pretty good pick. But it's not a guarantee Logan Jones becomes that either. And that kind of rounds out your 9 offensive linemen in the mix for starting work here to some extent or another. Probably only, Trapillo's going to start on the pup, so probably a couple of these guys will make it. Jordan McFadden is still interesting to me. I thought he was a bit of a technician coming out. He's played a little bit at this point, and maybe his depth, he could be okay if a guard goes down, because Logan Jones, I don't think is going to go play guard. Neither will Bradbury. And then Kieran Amagaji is looking like a rough pick at this point, but was a tradesy guy, third-round pick coming out of Yale who's been kind of kicked inside at this point. Luke Newman's played a little bit, but he struggled in pass pro when he did. But yeah, just kind of your standard NFL depth at that point on the O-line. That does round out the conversation on this O-line. Again, I had them ranked 9th for overall offensive line. They came in as a pass blocking unit, very solid, but in that big middle cluster of 9th to 18th, just indistinguishably good, solid units for pass pro, which is good. You'd much rather be in that category than anything worse than that. Not going to be necessarily locked down in pass pro. We saw that last year. There were some times where Caleb was getting hit and needed to get rid of the ball a little bit quicker or run for his life and do Caleb Williams things. I would expect some moments of that happening again. But the run blocking is 7th to 8th. Really good there, even with Drew Dahlman leaving. So you put that all together for the offense, and where did the Bears come out as a starting point heading into the year? 10th for me, which is really good considering there's a pretty optimistic projection that both the quarterback and the weapons will grow together and climb up in these rankings. And with a pretty damn solid offensive line foundation in front of you, it's not hard to imagine how that growth can lead from the 10th ranked offense heading into the year to top 3 or so. The path is honestly very clear. It's all about just execution, development, going to get it done. And then the last note here is, as far as the splits are concerned, they were 16th for passing games, so a little bit more to go if you're climbing up to being a consistently prolific passing game and cracking the top 10 and that kind of stuff. The run game, on the other hand, even though the running backs were just solid, they were in that tier, 21st to 27th for running back. Despite that, they are still my 8th ranked run game. And that's probably more of where I imagine they'll finish. O-line could maybe be a little bit better. Running back could maybe be a little bit better with Monungai heading into year 2. But overall, I think the 8th is like they're more at their floor as a run game, whereas it's more about the passing game really has to hit those green lights. But there is your Bears offense. Let's flip over to the other side of things and talk about their chances on the defensive side of the ball. And like I said earlier in the video, ideally things can be better on a down-to-down basis here so that this side of the ball doesn't have to count so heavily on turnovers. But let's talk about their chances of that being the case. And at least to begin, when we look at this defensive line, this is definitely my concern for the Bears. And, we'll get to predictions later, and I'm not necessarily saying this is going to be a disappointing season or anything like that. But, man, for a defensive line that was not good last year, and you've been really waiting for Ryan Poles to do something to get you more excited on this D-line, this is your offseason? Again? Like, really? Okay.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
At interior D-line, okay, you lose Andrew Billings, who managed to actually stay healthy for once. Good for him. But didn't play great at his age. Chris Williams. Okay, it's not like you lost anybody, but your additions are getting Shamar Turner back, who sucked when he played and was a reach. They continue to give out these free agent deals that make me scratch my head. Like Neville Gallimore gets a 2-year, $10 million contract here. I hardly view him as an addition. They drafted a developmental Jordan Vandenberg in the 6th round. Okay, it's a fun pick. Can't count on that to give you too much. All right, Shamar Turner coming back healthy, relatively solid addition when he only played 6% of snaps last year, but it's not enough for me to say upgraded on the interior D-line. It's not. And then at edge, okay, they're not losing anybody. They didn't have anybody to lose. Dominique Robinson, who played 21% of snaps last year, is no longer with the team. Good riddance. Their only addition is getting a motivated Dayo Odeyingbo back.
He said it.
Like, that literally is what you are hanging your hat on if you're a Bears fan, is a quote about Dayo Odeyingbo being motivated, which was my cold open joke, by the way, if you had no idea what I was talking about. He played 30% of snaps after getting hurt after week 6 or 7.
He said it.
And he's back into the mix here, motivated apparently. So I said slightly upgraded at edge, hopefully getting a full season of Dayo Odeyingbo. But I'm not optimistic about this D-line. I don't know how you could be. They rank as my 30th D-line as we head into this season. 29th to 30th for pass rush, 27th to 29th for run defense. And honestly, there's some guys that are going to get opportunities that you're hoping have the green up arrow on them and can be more of an impact. But I don't even know that there's that much upside for them to shatter this ranking or anything like that. I don't. I guess let's start at edge. Now, you do have Montez Sweat, right? And he's a really good player. He's probably realistically, like, you want him to be your second best guy. He's a really high-end number 2, but we've seen, like, how much this pass rush has struggled when he is, like, the focal point of your pass rush. He was 101st out of 129 players in true pass set pressure rate. Better than that in terms of win rate. 47th out of 128, and he's going to get a lot of attention, right? He's going to get a lot of chip help and double teams because he's all they have. But he was, 57th in total pressure rate. good, really good player. If he was your number 2, we'd be celebrating it. But he's not only is he your number 1, but he's largely all you even freaking have. I will say this about Montez Sweat. The durability and the motor are really quite valuable. He plays so many snaps. It's a core reason why his total pressures are really high, because his snap count is super high. To play 900 snaps as a defensive lineman is not easy. And he continues to like run, he had a lot of like cleanup sacks and like does not give up on a play. He's a good run defender playing at that snap count. I really like Montez Sweat. It's a really like good piece, but there's a lot of good D lines in the league. And when that's largely all you have, it just doesn't stack up to most D lines in the league. And that's how you end up at 30th. But you do have Gervon Dexter is the Bears' number 2. Again, like someone, if he was your number 3 or 4, you're hyping him up and saying, all right, like if he takes another step, that's huge. But you're more like desperately counting on him to continue to take another step. And, I like Gervon Dexter. I think he has developed year by year enough so that I put the up arrow on him. They haven't been like massive leaps. And I don't think we've seen such an upside from Gervon Dexter that I'm expecting him to like break through and be this monster game changer pass rusher. But, he is athletic. He's got a good bull rush. He's got a really good feel at this point for the kind of shock and go power to speed pass rush. I thought his run defense was pretty disappointing this year. I think you got some questions about what he's bringing to the table on early downs to help you get to some of those pass rush situations. I think if Dexter takes another leap, he can be at least a good enough pass rusher that if he were a number 2, you could be happy with him and his efficiency as a number 2. But that again is in a world where you have more of a game-wrecking number 1. So like the best case scenario here really, outside of some of these deeper depth pieces surprising us, is if Dexter takes another step forward, you have probably a high-end number 2 and realistically still probably more of a low-end number 2. Again, not the end of the world necessarily, but stacking that up against most D-lines in the league, it's not great. And beyond that, even if you have a couple of good number 2s, you want to get something from the other guys that are out there because you do have to start 4 guys. And there's some other D-lines that, all right, their best players might be similar to a Sweat and Dexter, and it's like, I really wish we had a number 1. But there's some other D-lines that at least have like 4 guys that are somewhat solid to good. After Dexter, this is gross. This is gross. I mean, look, the Dio jokes are entertaining, but this was always an egregious overpay. He was a rotational, like 5th piece as a hybrid end on a Colts D line, and Ryan Poles and Dennis Allen, the one big weakness on Dennis Allen is going back to his time in New Orleans. He has not been able to provide the right input to fix a defensive line. Spent 2 first-round picks to move up for Marcus Davenport. They spent a first-rounder on Peyton Turner. They overdrafted Isaiah Foskey. Shamar Turner was his first choice here, along with Dio Odeyingbo and Grady Jarrett. Like, there might not be a worse D-line evaluator than Dennis Allen, who undoubtedly is going to voice his opinion on some free agent signings coming in for Ryan Poles. To be fair, Ryan Poles should at some point say no. Like, we don't want to pay Dio Odeyingbo $20 million a year. That's not who he is. But here we are. And let's just assume Dio is healthy and coming back here. I mean, he was towards the bottom of the league in pressure rate last year. I thought he would at least be like a pretty good run defender in a Dennis Allen system, playing a little bit more like heavy-handed defensive end because he largely played D-tackle for the Colts. No, he didn't really show better run instincts or that his size would play better on the edge. That was a disappointment. And yeah, they showed really no signs that they were going to find creative ways to use him or that he was going to win a bunch of reps. Like, before the injury, he had 10 pressures on 207 pass rush snaps. We talk about 10% pressure rate as the cutoff for like you're winning just enough that you deserve to be on an NFL field. When you're half of that, that's horrible. Now, when he does win, it looks pretty. Like, he's super athletic. When he does connect on the bull rush, he can have some impact reps, but you might wait 5 weeks to see another one of those. So he's here. He's your number 2 edge. He is almost definitively the worst number 2 edge in the league, outside of maybe Miami, who's an unserious roster right now. And then your number 2 defensive tackle is also probably the worst number 2 defensive tackle in the league. And again, the fact that they agreed to pay Grady Jarrett what they did, Grady Jarrett was probably like, you know what, I might retire soon. And then the Bears are like, here's $40 million for the next 3 years. And he's like, oh, well, I guess I have to keep playing football. Dude, I love Grady Jarrett in his prime, one of the more underrated players like 5 years ago. He's not an impact anymore. He was already undersized and he's lost a little bit of that twitch. He's just hanging in there fighting for his life. Again, 23 pressures on 481 pass rush snaps. I almost feel bad for Grady Jarrett. He had to play 730 snaps last year. Like, they're not even taking a vet here and allowing him to be like catching his breath and like rotating. Like, they need him that badly. He is undersized. He gets abused as a run defender. I mean, he gets a 73 rating really out of respect for who he once was. He didn't even play up to it last year. He's the definition of like, he is getting older and regressing. And the fact that this team, if we look, again, we'll get to predictions later. I may or may not still like this Bears team, but if we get to the end of the year and they disappoint, you can almost single-handedly point back to the fact that they had to pay Grady Jarrett and Dayo Odeyingbo a combined $39 million against the cap. And on top of that, like, it's not just what they had to pay them, but it's, you know, that doesn't allow for a Max Crosby move or, you know, to do anything to go get actual pass rush help. Like, that roadblocked them in so many ways. That's going to be why. Like, this is really bad. After that, you're like squinting and praying for any number of dart throws to work out here. Lowly invested guys like Austin Booker, you know, Jordan Vandenberg, an overdrafted Shamar Turner last year. We can get into these guys and what their skill sets are, what kind of chances they have here. I'm obviously not super high on it. I think Austin Booker is the most promising. I really don't want to paint this like there's just no chance that this works out, because I like the idea of Austin Booker as, all right, it's year 3. He was really raw coming out. He's had to kind of bulk up and learn a lot because he hardly played in college. There's an exciting trajectory here. But he's on most of these depth charts. He's like the 4th guy that you're like, hopefully he eventually develops into a spot where he can replace a guy, maybe be a like legit number 3 someday, you know, like those types of expectations. Here it's like, man, it'd be really nice if we could get serious contributions from Austin Booker. If we don't, we're in trouble. Like, that's just not where you want to be with an Austin Booker. I will say this, like, he came out, got healthy a few weeks into the year and bull rushed Orlando Brown, which doesn't happen. And there's some points on his tape. I went through and watched all his pressures, like surprising amount of shock in his hands. He's got really quick feet. He's got some inside swipe moves. There's a skill set to work with there. Still someone that like has a long way to go in terms of consistently winning one-on-one reps. And it's not like he is the most crazy explosive guy. He's more like quick and fluid than he is just incredibly explosive to me. Again, we'll see what he can do here in year 3. There's a nice developmental trajectory here. It's good for his sake that he's going to have an opportunity here to see what works, see what doesn't work. That's great to see where this goes. That's not great for a Bears team trying to make a Super Bowl push here and count on a better pass rush. And then after Austin Booker, I mean, there's really no conversation after that either, which is fucking crazy. Like, okay, Daniel Hardy, undrafted type, Jonathan Garvin, who had a a little bit of a time in the sun like 3 years ago with some decent pass rushes for Green Bay, but he himself was like a 7th round pick. It's just barren on the edge here. I'm still in shock. Like, we're how many years into this thing, and they still have an edge room that looks like this. It's insane. And it's not like the interior D-line is that much more exciting. I mean, you have Shamar Turner, who is probably your biggest hope at any sort of impactful player after Austin Booker. Again, it's a hope and a prayer. He was someone they took in the 2nd round last year, was a very raw, athletic defensive tackle coming out of Texas A&M. To me, was a late 3rd, early 4th round guy. And they're kind of doing the tweener thing with him on top of all this. Like, he's half edge, half D tackle, where it's like, all right, they're keeping him where he's not big enough to consistently defend the run as a 3-tech, but he's not athletic enough to actually like have a pass rushing skill set off the edge. I don't really like what they're doing with him. I don't really like where they drafted him. He has athletic measurables, and for whatever it's worth, I thought his hands were really strong in the run game on his college tape. In the 90 snaps we got to watch of him last year, he got his ass kicked in the trenches. I mean, right now, just for him to become a useful rotational player would be a pretty big leap from what he showed last year and what the expectations might realistically be here. I do think he'll get better because it's almost impossible for him to be worse. But I definitely don't think this is like he's going to take a leap and all of a sudden he's, Grady Jarrett gets to be your number 3 and, you're feeling much better about your starter next to Jervon Dexter. That would be, I mean, that just feels so far-fetched to me because you're now putting all this extra stuff on top of a prospect that wasn't a good player in college to begin with. So he's your biggest hope. They signed Neville Gallimore. He's a good athlete. That's probably the end of the compliments on Neville Gallimore, who's getting paid $5 million a year here for some reason. I don't know what what kind of drug they're smoking when they load up Indianapolis Colts tape, because it was probably the same drug they watched when they decided to pay Oda Ingbo. If leveraged correctly, Neville Gallimore's athleticism and get off on loops and stunts can be deployed. Okay, so there's your next 2 defensive tackles after your starter in Grady Jarrett. You got Contavious Street. He's been around the league. He's a hybrid end. Good first step and strong hands, but very minimal assets after that. Jordan Vandenberg was a 6th round pick, and he's a fun prospect, tested super well, high motor guy. I actually like the developmental trajectory for him to get there someday. And he's probably going to have an opportunity to play here, which is exciting. His pass rush production came almost exclusively off of twists and stunts, so there's not really much of a ability to like beat one-on-one blocks as a pass rusher from a technique standpoint. The run defense was inconsistent, like from a pad level play strength point of view. You love the motor, but there's just so much to teach this guy. He was a 6th round pick for a reason, but someday I think he'll get there. I don't see him being much of an impact in year 1. That'd be pretty crazy. Crazier things have happened, I guess, but let's keep it realistic here. I mean, James Lynch might be their most proven defensive tackle off the bench, and he hasn't played well for like 2 years. And even then, he was a rotational piece. So, like, Jesus, man, I'm sorry, but I just genuinely don't understand how this unit is constructed. And like, dude, Montez Sweat is doing so much heavy lifting just to make you the 30th best defensive line. God forbid something happen to him where he plays as much as he does. You could really end up in deep shit here. And you kind of already are. But that's your defensive line. Let's see what the rest of this defense looks like, and if they have enough to like dig this defense into competency, I suppose. And as we go to the linebackers here, the tone can change a little bit, at least. Like, it gets better. It does. As we look at their offseason changes, they did say goodbye to Tremaine Edmonds. Not the end of the world. He is a loss, but they basically just kind of like reshifted that money. They signed Devin Bush for $10 million, going to be less against the cap, whereas Tremaine Edmonds was going to be like 16 against the cap. Edmonds was very reasonable, like solid starter, was pretty good signing for the Giants for what he got, but he couldn't really justify paying him what he was going to make this year. So a little bit of cap redistribution. They go get Devin Bush. It was a good addition. I like the signing. We'll talk about him. They also made some lesser additions that might not end up being lesser additions. Jack Sanborn and Keyshawn Elliott as well. So I did say slightly upgraded at linebacker. So that's good. That's something. But that said, this unit is definitely a wild card unit for the Bears. There's definitely some question marks here, but there's also upside here. So it's really TJ Edwards and Devin Bush are technically the starters. Devin Bush definitely is. But TJ Edwards is up in the air, not just in terms of availability, but how healthy is he going to be when he does play, and how durable is he going to remain when he does hopefully get back out there. He is currently on the PUP list. I think they're cautiously optimistic with a calf injury that he'll be back out there at some point. But definitely their offseason tells you like they're trying to put some insurance policies in place here, anticipating that TJ Edwards, like the probability that TJ Edwards is going to be fully healthy and play all year and be a big impact. That's a bit of a prayer. Now I love TJ Edwards when he's healthy. And I will say this, like, he is a guy that has never relied on his athleticism. So theoretically, continuing to play at a high level after an injury, I guess that's kind of familiar territory. Whereas a lot of athletic guys, like if they lose a little bit of a step, they have to adjust. Now, if TJ Edwards goes from a poor athlete to, you know, an abysmal one, that could also be a problem, I suppose. He's just a total wild card across the board. But I love him when he's healthy. One of the most instinctive run defenders in the league, nasty taking on blocks, totally maximizes his ability in coverage. Like, if you could take TJ Edwards' coverage IQ and put it in like any of these freaky first round linebacker prospects that get overdrafted because of their athleticism, you would end up with a like Pro Bowl, all pro type of linebacker. He can't always get where he's trying to go, but he definitely knows what he's doing in his zone drops. So I like TJ Edwards. It's just really hard to know what you're getting from him. So how do you rank that? Where do you place that? It's a toughie. And then Devin Bush is also a bit of a wild card because he was such a breakout last season after really being a first round bust. So he is a player that you're really encouraged by what he did last year. But it's a small sample size sport, and I think there's some bit of fear that new system, like he goes back to something closer to what he was for the majority of his career as just not much of an impact at linebacker. But the Cleveland tape was really good. And Bush has always been a guy coming, like since he came out at Michigan, where he's not afraid to trigger. He's got a great first step. He can really hit, even though he's really short. But he comes in low. He hits hard. He can find his way around blocks. That's probably the biggest concern is like Cleveland runs a very unique system where everything's moving and it's all about athleticism with their linebackers. Probably going to have to take on blocks more consistently here. So we'll see how that kind of goes. You know, he was able to kind of plug into the Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah role in many ways in that defense that, again, just opens things up for him a little bit better. His lack of size has worked against him at times, but Bush is also really instinctive and fast in coverage. So I really like the tape. I like the contract. I'm encouraged. I think he has a good chance, a better than not chance to actually be a really good signing and really help this defense at the second level, and that kind of swap going from Edmonds to Bush could maybe even be not just cheaper, but actually an upgrade, getting more instincts. Because Edmonds, like, kind of the opposite. huge and super athletic, but just kind of not a go-getter all the time at the linebacker position. Devin Bush is going to go try to make stuff happen, which is an exciting brand of football to watch. So I'm pretty optimistic, although there is a potential downside of the signing. Obviously, you can see how that paired with the injury calculation on TJ Edwards, it's hard to truly know what you're going to get from this duo this season. Now, I will say you're helped out. The TJ Edwards injury risk is helped out when you have options. You have one of the deepest groups of linebackers in the entire NFL at this point. Like, DeMarco Jackson did have to play last year, and it wasn't hideous. I think he's a guy that he's spent a decent amount of time in the league at this point. He's familiar with Dennis Allen, right? He was drafted by the Saints under Dennis Allen, I believe, and worked his way over here. So he knows the system. He's got decent size. He can hit. He can do a little bit of everything. I think he is your worst case scenario floor raiser, that if Devin Bush is good, Edwards can't play, we play DeMarco Jackson next to him. You're trying to avoid being ass at linebacker. I don't think you'd be ass with DeMarco Jackson and a good version of Devin Bush. But you got other guys too. Jack Sanborn comes back after a really rough year in Dallas last year. I thought he would win a starting job in Dallas with how bad that linebacker room was, and he struggled to get on the field. But I like that. I like the homecoming. He was really comfortable here, and he brings, he has shown some really high-end plays as a run defender. And there were moments where we were like, could he be the next TJ Edwards as someone that really understands the position, isn't super athletic, but just gets it? Keeping an eye on Jack Sanborn there. You've also got 5th round pick Keyshawn Elliott. And I think Bears fans watching this are like, dude, does he just hate all of our draft picks? You think they were all reaches? No, Keyshawn Elliott was, to me, a 3rd round linebacker prospect. Now he's starting the season on the PUP, so there could have been some medical stuff there that led him to drop into the 5th round. But in a ecosystem where it's really hard to find young linebackers that are good at taking on blocks, that get through their read keys, that were actually asked to do NFL linebacker things in college, Keyshawn Elliott was one of them. Kind of in the TJ Edwards category, where he is stiff. He's not overly athletic. Elliott does have decent enough long speed, though. He stood out as a potential starter at the next level. Not really much from a coverage standpoint. You want to keep him in the short game, blitzing, hook zones at best. But if he can get healthy, he's right in the mix there with like Sanborn and Jackson and Noah Sewell. Sewell to me is probably more of your base Sam linebacker. He's like 250 pounds, really more of a unique linebacker, kind of a poor man's Leo Chanel. He's had some good games. He's really good at taking on blocks, but the rest of like moving in space and being consistent, there's been a lot more holdups with him, and he's also injured on the PUP list. So not so much counting on him, but he is in the mix. And even Ruben Hippolyte was a 4th round pick that was taken a good bit too early, and they're kind of doing everything they can to, say, hey, kind of shit or get off the pot here. Like, there's all these other guys, show us something. Because he was overdrafted because of his workout scores. But that's kind of the prototype early day 3 linebacker pick is, they're not going to be good right away, but you're hoping to coach them up and hopefully something could click. I'm not necessarily counting on it, but it's hard to imagine they keep all these guys, but as a 7th linebacker, a recent 4th round pick and an athletic guy in Hippolyte is probably one of the best LB7s in the NFL, which I bet Ruben Hippolyte didn't think he'd be saying that when he got drafted. Life goals, right? So a tough group to rank. It's a true wild card. Fitting, I think, that they actually came out right in the middle. 16th at linebacker for me. B- grades across the board. 16th to 18th for linebacker run defense. 9th to 14th for coverage, because I do think, if nothing else, Devin Bush, I like what he brings to the table there. There's only so many good coverage linebackers in the league, and if TJ Edwards is out there as a complement to Devin Bush, he's good enough in a coverage role. So a clear wild card, could definitely finish higher or lower or exactly this. Definitely just going to have to wait and see with the middle of this Bears defense. But then you go to the secondary, and they were busy this offseason as well. A lot of shakeup between free agent moves, draft picks, guys in and out of the lineup for injury. So at cornerback, they say goodbye to Nahshon Wright, which, and that paired with like Kevin Byard and Jaquan Brisker, I've been hard on Ryan Poles for like the D-line. I will give them credit where credit's due. I think this was a rare sign or a rare example of a team having the ability to look themselves in the mirror and project forward. Like Kevin Byard and Nahshon Wright had awesome years. Massive part of their turnover creation, like Nahshon Wright, Kevin Byard, like they actively made some of those interceptions happen. But understanding that was doing a lot of heavy lifting, and it's hard to count on that, and that these guys did have their issues on a down-to-down basis, and then trying to be proactive to get better at those positions and not just count on, I mean, would that be a combined, I should probably look it up, but I'm just going to go off the top of my head. I think Kevin Byard had 6 interceptions, and Nahshon Wright had probably 7 turnovers, including the forced fumbles. So are those two guys that you're counting on 12 turnovers again next year? Probably not. And Bears fans, tell me in the comments how close I got to being accurate on that off the top of my head, because I'm curious. But I respect looking in the mirror and being like, no, we can actually do better than that. But compared to what they got from those guys last year, that is production that will be missing. That's essentially what we're doing here, is comparing what they have now compared to what they had last year. And those guys did have good years. Even if I agree, they probably were not going to repeat it. Jaquan Brisker, also an example of looking yourself in the mirror. I think a lot of teams just take the optimistic spin on injury-prone players. And the Lions, for example, are actually really bad at this. Jaquan Brisker played pretty well last year. I think it's a good process to be like, he actually played all but like one snap last year. Probably not going to happen again. Let's look elsewhere at safety. Now, he did play 100% of snaps last year. He is a loss. So kind of a similar conversation for a different reason. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson as well actually racked up 50% of snaps played for them, largely in the slot last year. Probably should have just listed him with the corners, but we're here. So a lot of losses, right? And then you have kind of stuck in the middle, Kyler Gordon. Is he a loss? Is he an addition? How much is he going to play? That's a big question mark. You know, he only played 4 games, 17% of snaps last year. Unfortunately, starting the season on the PUP list, and we don't even know if he's going to give them that many games. So he's kind of stuck in the middle in terms of missed a lot of time last year. You'd hope he's back, but it might not be the case. And then you have a handful of additions. You have guys definitely coming back from injury. Jalen Johnson, who only played a third of their games last year. Terrell Smith, who missed all of last season, an interesting young corner. And then you have new players that you've brought in. They give Kobe Bryant, the safety from Seattle, a 3-year, $40 million contract. They add Cam Lewis for some veteran depth on I think like a 2-year, $6 million contract, so not nothing. And then a couple of draft picks. Most notable, Dylan Thieneman, safety out of Oregon, awesome pick, and a 4th-round pick in Malik Muhammad out of Texas. So it's a whirlwind of change in the secondary. I think I agree with everything they did, though. And I said upgraded at cornerback, even with Kyler Gordon's status up in the air. And safety, I did say to be determined. I think it could definitely be an upgrade. But in reality, like, they did get some pretty great years from Kevin Byard and a really good year from Jaquan Brisker. Even if these were the right moves to project success at the safety position moving forward, comparing it to the play they got at that position group last year will be hard to replace for Kobe Bryant and Dylan Thieneman. Not impossible. I think to be determined is the right balance of how to analyze that situation. But anyway, let's talk about this Bears secondary. which is also a major wild card, just like the linebacker was. And unfortunately, for a similar reason with the injuries, the biggest of which is Kyler Gordon, who just really struggles to stay healthy. It's so hard to know how much he's going to play. These soft tissue injuries especially just really scare you. So we can you kind of have to just announce that and get it out of the way. Like, he's one of the better slot corners in the NFL. If he didn't play a snap this year, I don't even think any Bears fans would really be surprised. And then even Jalen Johnson, you're optimistic with him coming back. He has missed a lot of time throughout his career. And honestly, a big reason his contract wasn't as big as you might have thought for a guy that had played at his level is you kind of pencil in a missed month here and there. He's kind of like Jamel Dean in that sense, or like Carlton Davis. So you're not as worried about his injury stuff as Kyler Gordon, but it definitely bakes into a lack of certainty with how many games you're going to get from the two best current members of your secondary with Johnson and Kyler Gordon. So that has to be kind of thrown out there right away on top of all this. Going to try to not obsess about the injury stuff and just break down what they have to work with here, because it is a fun secondary. It is. And Jalen Johnson's a really good CB1. I think that one season, which was like all pro level cornerback play, probably elevated him to a point that was a little bit unrealistic in terms of like what he's been otherwise. Cornerback is a volatile position, and you can get those big ebbs and flows. I don't think Jalen Johnson's a lockdown elite all pro corner. I don't. He's really physical. He doesn't have like those incredible athletic traits. It's essentially impossible to be the level of where the top 5 or 6 corners in the NFL are today without the speed, stop, start, agility, burst out in space. It's essentially impossible to be that good. But Jalen Johnson is about as good as you could hope for from someone with just pretty average physical tools at the cornerback position. He's super physical and press. He gets his head around to find the ball. He's a high IQ zone corner. Historically speaking, he has been much better as a zone corner than a man corner. Overall, to me, a really good CB1, somewhere in the probably 11 to 15 range of starting corners in the league when he's able to be out there on the field. So that's a really good starting point for sure. And then you have probably still some bit of a competition at CB2, but Tyreek Stevenson probably locked himself into this by finishing pretty strong last season. I like Tyreek Stevenson. I always have. He hasn't quite turned into the player I thought he would be. He's just been really inconsistent at a position that it's hard to be consistent at. And certainly being behind one of the worst pass rushers in the NFL isn't doing him any favors, but he's had his boneheaded moments. He's just had games where he's getting picked on. He's had games where he's looking like a CB1 at times, just been a little bit all over the map. I think that's fine as a CB2. There's a lot of CB2s around the league that are kind of like that, where you don't necessarily know what you're getting week in, week out. You don't want to have to count on him against number one receivers week in, week out, but you put him out there, and if he has a bad game, he has a bad game, but you might end up with a really great performance as well. Probably where we are with Tyreek Stevenson at this point. I don't know that he's ever going to settle in and be this super consistent high-end CB2, but you could do worse than him out there as a starter. And then you have Terrell Smith coming back from injury. Again, we'll see how healthy he is and how well he responds, but he was very much going to be challenging Tyreek Stevenson for a starting cornerback job last year. Same draft class, really physical, decent speed, a nice cornerback prospect, honestly, that has played well when he's been on the field and has started to kind of incrementally climb from being a day 3 draft pick. So I'm interested in his recovery and what kind of role he can have. I think he's probably going to start as a backup and a really good backup as a perimeter corner. But if Stevenson starts to struggle or if Johnson gets hurt, you very well can picture a world where Smith gets some opportunities and ends up, climbing up the ladder here a little bit. You got Jalen Jones, Josh Blackwell. they're kind of CB4, CB5 types that have played a little bit here, but you're hoping they stay there and you don't have to start them as they've had to do at times for both those guys. The interesting guy here would be Malik Muhammad. To me, was a good pick, a good value, really athletic, tradesy corner. I had a 3rd round grade on. They get him in the 4th, so not too far behind that. Probably someone that was just not steady enough in coverage, that has too much to learn to count on him to make an impact in his rookie season. Just, a little bit all over the place. Randomly gets grabby in coverage, randomly would stop his feet. He showed moments of really good zone IQ and moments of just leaving way too much space and not reading things. Just a little bit all over the map, but you can see definitely a guy that, when it clicks, it's pretty looking. He's physical. He's got the tools. There could be something there. He's not entirely dissimilar from like what the idea of Terrell Smith, who I think was a 5th round pick. Muhammad, though, I do think is quick enough that he could play slot. And if he proves to be physical enough, which I think it's in there, he could be a surprise as a nickel. He's kind of in this middle ground of like, probably would struggle in his rookie season, but there was enough there that I wouldn't be stunned if something clicked and he surprised. Hence why he had ultimately a day 2 grade for me. So I'm interested, and I think the upside is there. But certainly if you are counting on a full season of him in the nickel, especially because Kyler Gordon gets hurt, you're just in a much more, wide range of potential outcomes, certainly. Ideally, Kyler Gordon can get back out there. I just don't know. I don't think anybody knows. He's quick. He's feisty. He's a good zone corner. He can hang man to man. I love Kyler Gordon. They extended him because they love Kyler Gordon. It's the definition of a freaking wild card, man. Who knows how much he's going to play? It's frustrating that he's hurt, but it's where we're at right now. And it kind of makes this secondary hard to rank, if I'm being honest. Because without him, it's a weak link position group. And without him, you potentially have quite the weak link, depending on how good Muhammad is. You're probably talking about like Cam Lewis stepping in there to be the slot. We'll see what their kind of plan B is after Kyler Gordon. Because like Stevenson, Johnson, definitely outside corners. Terrell Smith, an outside corner. Maybe Smith can play the nickel, but I just don't think that's really his skill set. Cam Lewis, yes, has played some slot. He's played some split safety. I don't mind him as he's like a swing tackle for your secondary. A really nice Swiss Army knife backup that, he's not that tradesy. He's not a prolific coverage player. He's not that big as a run defender, but he can play slot corner and both of your safety spots and keep the floor alive, keep the ship from sinking. So technically, as a slot corner reinforcement piece, it keeps the floor from falling out from underneath you. Or maybe you take Kobe Bryant, who's played some nickel corner, put him in the nickel, and Cam Lewis plays some safety. Kind of the same idea. It doesn't really change the math, whether Cam Lewis is in the nickel or safety for me. Pretty interchangeable in that sense. But Cam Lewis does kind of finish up the cornerback conversation for us. Then you go to the safety room, and it's a really fun safety duo. I'm actually going to start with Dylan Thieneman because he gets me freaking fired up, man. There's been my fair share of like negative feedback on this Bears defense and some draft picks that I haven't liked for this Bears defense. Not the case with Dylan Thieneman. He was a top 10 player in this draft class for me. I think he is a potentially elite free safety at the next level. Rare speed, ball skills, read and react skills. I think he got fairly miscast as a strong safety because he did play a lot of cover 2 mid-read, which is technically going to put him closer to the line of scrimmage and as more of a strong safety. But the reason that they did that was that he's so good over the middle of the field that they could take their safeties, have them cover towards the sideline, play a cover 2, which was kind of half cover 2, half cover 3 with really 3 deep responsible safeties. And they just had Dylan Thieneman take control of the entire middle of the field. So if you don't really dissect the coverage assignment and what his responsibility was, you might say, oh, they're using him as a strong safety. He's 6'3". He's going to play around the box. And because of that, he got some Harrison Smith comps, and maybe some other reasons he got some Harrison Smith comps. But that's not how I saw him. I see him as a true free safety, which does fit in a Dennis Allen defense. They will deploy cover 3, cover 1, especially like Dylan Thieneman is a great cover 1 safety because, yes, he's got the center fielding ability, but he can also come down, man up tight ends, be that aspect of the cover 1 as well. He can buzz down into a hook zone. So eventually you're hoping to be able to probably run more cover 1, and having a safety like this helps unlock some of that stuff if you get some more man-oriented corners. Honestly, despite him getting so many strong safety projections, where he struggled the most was finishing tackles. And he is a little bit thinner. He can take on blocks, but he's not amazing at it. I want him deep as a deep safety, playing in space where he is incredible. And what's crazy is like a lot of the best free safeties in the NFL, Jesse Bates, maybe like Marcus Williams at a point in time was up there in a Dennis Allen defense back on the Saints. We're pretty far removed from that at this point after he flamed out in Baltimore. But some of the better free safeties we've seen are like 4-5 speed guys. The fact that Thieneman has all of the, I think, like reactionary ability, read react skills, the mental side of things to have range. Like I talk about how you don't have to have 4-3 speed to be this like crazy center fielder and take stuff away in a midfield assignment. The fact that he has 4-3 whatever speed and it shows on tape, it sure as hell don't hurt, Like I think 40 time is overrated at safety, but if you've got all the other stuff and the speed, and you're not just Lewis Cine who has speed and doesn't know what the hell he's looking for, it sure as hell doesn't hurt. So I'm a big fan of Dylan Thieneman. I think he's going to be a phenomenal pick, a superstar, a top 5 safety in the NFL someday, and it could happen sooner rather than later. So like, no holes barred? Is that the wrong expression there? I don't even know, but open up the floodgates, I guess, on the Dylan Thieneman hype train. Kobe Bryant's a good signing. 3 years, $40 million sounds about right. I think if his name was anything other than Kobe Bryant, you're probably not hyping him up as much. He's a good playmaker on the back end. Cornerback experience is always useful when you're a safety. It just helps you see things differently, understand when you have to be more conservative, when you can take those risks. He's got good ball production because of that. He plays physical. Honestly, man, like if he didn't miss almost 20% of his tackles last year, I'd be a little bit higher on him, but that ain't great. It's not. If he can improve the tackling, this could be even a value of a signing. If the tackling stays that big of an issue, and remember, he was like an outside corner coming in. So like tackling responsibilities from the safety position are still relatively new for him. So that could go either way, if he can become a more steady tackler, this could be a really good signing. If he continues to miss 20% of your tackles, that's an issue. It's something we gloss over, I think, at times, but that's probably the most important thing, is to be a steady tackler, especially because I anticipate he's going to be more of the buzz down, play more, run fits, that kind of stuff than Thieneman. We'll see how they want to use those guys, but that's what I would do at least. Thieneman's got the speed and the range back there, and Bryant's got the slot corner background to be more of that true strong safety. But it's a good safety duo nonetheless, so I like what they got there. And then you have some depth as well, like Cam Lewis's depth can kind of do everything, just kind of a jack of all trades, master of none, secondary piece. Elijah Hicks has played a little bit. He's been okay. I think as a fourth safety, Elijah Hicks is just fine, and they knew that. They brought him back 1 year, $2.5 million, like pretty good money for a safety. For more project types after that. And that rounds out all the players in this secondary. just like the linebacker room, it's a tough group to really rank with not knowing if Kyler Gordon's going to play. Definitely think Jalen Johnson is an injury-prone player, and then just how good is Dylan Thieneman going to be as a rookie? Tough group to rank, but they did come out with pretty good rankings in the secondary. Certainly the highest-rated unit for the defense, 10th to 12th for DB coverage, 12th overall for their secondary ranking, but definitely a wild card. Got to hit some green lights back here, because as we take a look at the entire defense, my goodness, does this defensive line need some help. Now, still getting some pretty respectable rankings from their secondary there, and having a solid ranking coming in at linebacker, and a coaching staff led by Dennis Allen, who I do like. There's enough of a floor being raised there that gets them to the 21st overall defense and a very balanced split, 20th in pass defense, 22nd in run defense. But pretty clearly taken down from the defensive line. And you can also very easily see, like, I just don't know that there's a ton of wiggle room for the D-line to be a whole lot better or worse. Health at linebacker in secondary could literally be life or death for this team's season. It's a shaky outlook for this defense, and you could end up having to put a lot of pressure on a very young offense, which, as exciting as the Bears are, it's dangerous. Like, it's a volatile, dangerous football team, if not extremely exciting. But let's talk a little special teams for the Bears. Offseason changes. They do say goodbye to Devin Duvernay. He's a very good returner, but I'm not worried about it. They supplement it with Xavier Thomas, who we didn't really mention this with him, but he projects a really good returner, which can hopefully add some value as that third-round pick. And Khalif Raymond can do it as well. And the Bears special teams does rank pretty well as a projection here, 10th on special teams. Cairo Santos has been great as a kicker. Torrey Taylor has actually graded out really poorly, despite being one of the more hyped up punters in recent memory. You got those two gadget receivers are your two returners there, which is at worst a very solid projection at returner. And then I also bake in the PFF team grade and the DVOA team grade for special teams from last season, where they were 11th for PFF, 19th for DVOA. So comes out 10th, and should be a relative strength for this team, barring anything unexpected. But let's start to recap my strengths, weaknesses, and pivotal factors for the Bears before we actually take a look at the schedule. And I got to put my money where my mouth is at some point here and put some predictions on the table for this Bears team. And to me, this Venn diagram of strengths, weaknesses, pivotal factors shows that the Bears have one of the clearest, like, I guess, call it scripts or game plans for what they need to go right for this season to work. They have some pretty clear strengths, being their head coach in Ben Johnson and the offensive line, laying the groundwork for an offense with a still young Caleb Williams and young explosive group of weapons to all come together and make the offense the driving force of this team. Also paired with, not even like joking about this, the fourth quarter. Like, seriously, their ability between Caleb Williams' playmaking ability and Ben Johnson's, I think, combination of like fourth down play calling ability and ability to push those right buttons when the game's on the line. If they can keep games close, nobody wants to see the Bears in a one-score game with 3 minutes left. We saw time and time again last year that the game is not over against this team until it's over, because it takes 3 plays for Caleb and these guys to put up a touchdown. So offensively, it's quite clear, like, we just need proper development from Caleb Williams, Luther Burden, Loveland. You're pretty much good to go offensively at that point. And then just give them enough help on defense. I think the D-line is a definitive weakness. I don't think that's going to change. But you have linebacker and secondary. You have talent there, but a ton of injury questions. And also a Devin Bush who's coming off a 1-year breakout, really. Also a part of the wild card equation there. So if you can hit some green lights, get some guys healthy at the second and third level of the defense, just be okay there with some good coaching, let the offense cook. That's your path to success for the Bears. Now, what am I predicting? Let's look at their schedule, put my own prediction on the table for this team, because I've said some negative things about this Bears team, right? You could certainly be up to this point in the video and be like, he thinks we're not going to be able to stop anybody. We're going to suck. Luther Burden and Caleb aren't going to hit their upside. That's not what I'm saying. I actually have the Bears predicted to win 10 games, which is higher than their season over-under. That is a bet the over on the Bears. And despite some of the question marks, I don't think their floor is that bad, because even with all these youth questions on offense, I still had them as the 10th best offense. I think Ben Johnson is phenomenal. I don't think their defense was that good last year. And they what did they finish with? 11 wins last year? I should probably know that. Yeah, 11 wins. I got it right. Don't second guess myself. So I still think even if the defense is a disaster and Caleb doesn't get a whole lot better, and the weapons maybe aren't all green lights, you're still probably talking about a 7-win team. I don't think their schedule's that bad. It's not like a cakewalk or anything like that, but I see a fair share of winnable games out there. You know, they play the NFC South and the AFC East, which is, those are probably the two weakest divisions. AFC East is debatable, but they're in the bottom half of divisions. NFC South is definitely the worst. And I also like that you get New England and Tampa at home. When you're borderline, I would prefer to get your tough games at home, and then the games you're not as afraid of, get those on the road and go get your wins. So like getting to go to Miami, at Carolina week 1 with all their injuries, at Atlanta week 6. Those don't scare me as much than if you had to go to New England or go to Tampa. But ultimately, I don't think the schedule is a huge factor one way or another for this Bears team, just looking at it. Sometimes the schedule I have, bigger notes on one way or another. To me, it's more about the Bears taking care of their business and doing their thing, to be a team to get through this. And in my opinion, win 10 games, which is closer to my ceiling projection on the Bears, which is 11, which is how many games they won last year. It's really hard to win 11 games in the NFL. And we saw the Bears do that last year by the skin of their teeth, right? I definitely think this team can be a much better overall football team than they were last year. I think if the offense is more consistent and the defense on a down-to-down basis can be at least a little bit more stable. I'm obviously not super optimistic about the defense. But I think they can get back to 11 wins and combat some regression in terms of maybe some close game luck and certainly the turnovers. I would say for a team that clearly has a volatile outlook, as we've described, I'm taking more of an optimistic spin and prediction on this Bears team. And now we'll get to see how that plays out. Now, the last segment here is going to be some team superlative picks. So let's have some fun and pick some awards for the Bears here. Team MVP. This one is interesting, and I think this kind of highlights something too with the Bears, where they actually don't really have like a definitive elite player right now. You're hoping Caleb can be that, maybe Luther Burden, or maybe my pick for this award being Colston Loveland. But I don't know, some teams are easier than others and I don't pick quarterback for this award anyway. But some teams, it's easier than others. Like the Vikings, like, well, yeah, it's Justin Jefferson, Like the Bears don't actually have that like definitive game-wrecking superstar yet. But I am going to go Colston Loveland, because I think if anybody has a chance to be like an all-pro elite player at their position other than Caleb Williams this year, I think that would be Colston Loveland. So that's why I'm going to go with MVP. And I think he also, just for all the schematic stuff we talked about, the 12 personnel, forcing teams into base versus nickel decision-making on their defensive side of the ball, that matters too. So Loveland's my pick for MVP. Biggest wild card, I think, is the other big pass catcher there, Luther Burden. Not going to rehash everything, but I think that the ceiling is a huge reason why he's a big wild card, because if he can reach his ceiling, that's incredible. But I think there is a certain floor with him too, where there is a chance that he could be a little bit more of a disappointment. So in terms of volatile range of outcomes, I went with Luther Burden. Of course, Caleb Williams, though. I don't pick quarterback for biggest wild card because it would be quarterback for almost every team, but it is, I think, emphasized on the Bears that this, like, you have to mention it. Like, so much of this depends on how big of a step Caleb Williams can take. Breakout offense was really hard for me. It was. And I really thought about Luther Burden. I think he'd be a good choice here. I do think the bar is set pretty high for what you could consider a Luther Burden breakout to actually be, because he was already good as a rookie. So he was a close consideration. Kind of the same deal with Loveland. Maybe I regret not just going with one of those guys because I try to get a little cute here, but I said Braxton Jones. Just like, I remember liking Braxton Jones tape, and hopefully he's healthy, and they really could use some help there at left tackle. I could see a world where he really wins himself back into Ben Johnson's favor and gets a nice contract here and breaks out. That could end up being a bad take. Loveland would definitely be the easy choice there, but I picked Loveland for MVP, so that would just be lazy. You get 2 positive takes there. Breakout defense, I really thought about, honestly, just leaving this one blank. I don't pick rookies for breakouts. I love Thieneman. I think he has a rookie breakout, but he's not eligible for this. I didn't see anybody else that I'm confident in actually stepping up for this defense. The closest thing I came to was Devin Bush. I do like Devin Bush. I could see him struggling. I could see him being really good here. I like the fit enough and the upside for him that I went with him for breakout defense. But that's that is definitely the closest I've come to just saying NA. Like, I don't have a pick. But we'll go Devin Bush and stay optimistic there. Unsung hero, another tough one on this team. I thought about Cole Kmet, but he spent so much time being overrated that didn't quite feel right. I actually went with Montez Sweat because the term hero felt right there. He is like their only reason of being competent sometimes on the D-line. So I think that was fitting. Just someone that probably isn't going to finish the year with a bunch of accolades, but I think you can look back on the year like, I would hate to see what this defense would have looked like without Montez Sweat. So that was my justification for that one. And then fantasy MVP is going to be Colston Loveland here. I think he's the 3rd tight end in terms of ADP, but he's going like 4th, 5th round. I think he could have a monster season. I do. And even if he doesn't necessarily outpace like Trey McBride or Brock Bowers, who I'm also really high on, I still think he can just outperform 4th, 5th round fantasy ADP. And when you get that big impact from the tight end position, from a fantasy football perspective, it's like having a catcher who hits in baseball. You just have something that not everybody has. So he was a fairly easy choice, especially knowing like Burden's price is going to be high. Caleb's price is going to be high. I'm like the opposite on Roma Dunze. I'm not really buying Roma Dunze. So I think it had to be Loveland. And like the running backs are going to split. I don't, take them where they're going, I guess. But I think you will not regret spending a decent draft pick on Colston Loveland, who's going to be really sick this year. So there's your Bears. Bears fans, let me know how I did. I waited till the end to say this. I mean, you guys know I'm a Packers fan, but for any new Bears fans watching, I wanted to finish the video before I inform you of that. But I'm always very proud of my Bears analysis and how honestly accurate I've been with it over the years. Just kind of going back, like, been relatively spot on with the Bears over the years, and I'm feeling good about this one. But let me know if I'm a hater and biased and all that. Let me have it. Or if you like the video, Let me know in the comments down below. Leave a like if you're on the Spotify. If you could leave a review, I really appreciate that as well for the podcast listeners out there. But that's all I've got. Let me know who you think comes next with the number 13 spot in these power rankings. How do you think the Bears do this year? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you soon. We're going out of town, going to visit our family in Chicago this weekend. So going to be doing some prep work, but won't be able to record for 3 or 4 days here. So going to be a little bit of a break in the actual posting of these videos, but we'll be back at it very soon, and I'll see you then. Cheers.